Okay, this is to serve as roll call. We have a full board in attendance this evening. Notification of meeting. The meeting was properly posted. And before we jump into any agenda items, I wanted to give a quick shout out to both Principal Kurt as well as Donna Smith. We're Mike. It's been a problem in the past, and we're happy for the song. So moving on to our first agenda item, we're going to look at the August 23rd, 2022 regular Board of Education meeting minutes. Do I have a recommendation to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve it.
I second.
Any further discussion? All in favor of the approval of the August 23rd, 2022 regular Board of Education meeting minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next up is the resolution to approve the bill list.
Motion to approve the bill list.
I'll second.
Any discussion around this? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The bill list is approved. Next up is the superintendent's report. Laura, thank you.
Thank you. Tonight I have two items, and the first one I'm particularly excited about. We have representatives from our DECA organization. So if you would come forward, please. And as Donna's working on getting the slide presentation up, I would just like to alert the board and the community that one of the biggest and best events of the whole school year is coming up Friday the 23rd, our Hawkfest School Carnival, Community Carnival. And so we thought it would be nice for DECA representatives to provide an overview of, or a preview of Hawkfest.
Hello, I'm Marcy Burkhart. I am the assistant DECA advisor. All right, thank you.
Hello. Okay. I am Marcy Burkhart. I am the assistant DECA advisor here at Arrowhead. Mr. Steve Melzer is our head advisor, but he is sick this evening, so he will not be joining us. I have 3 of our 27 students that are on our leadership team this year. This is our leadership team. We went to Camp Whitcomb for our annual leadership training in August and did all of our planning and prep for our community service and for our competition and for some of the activities that the students are going to share with you tonight. So I have Alan Whitmoyer. He is our DECA president this year. I have Lily Wakefield. She is one of our VPs of special events. And I have Grace Paul, who is on our leadership team. So I'm going to let Alan take it from here. Oh no, I'm going to let Grace. Sorry.
So first we have a few trivia questions. Which advertising slogan was launched by Nike in 1988? Correct. What is the name of the incredibly popular range of dolls introduced in the 1980s? Yes. What is the name of the hairstyle that was short at the front and sides but long in the back? Absolutely.
All right, fun trivia stuff. All right, so I guess for those of you that don't know what DECA is, we're going over what is it, why do it, and what Hawkfest is. So Hawkfest is coming up September 23rd. It's a school festival / fundraising event. We'll be talking all about that in this presentation. So first up, what is DECA? So at Arrowhead, it's one of the larger clubs, very intensive and a very fun club to be a part of. We're an association of marketing students, and our chapter here at Arrowhead is one of hundreds of thousands around the globe. Really, there's more than 200,000 DECA members around the world, and so it really is a large international organization. To be in DECA, there's of course the club requirements of attending all the meetings and events and such, but also it is a co-curricular club. So what that means is every student in DECA is part of a marketing related class. And as it's less accessible to freshmen, they are of course allowed to take intro to business to fulfill their DECA requirements. So as I said, there's 3,500 chapters in over 8 countries, and so we are one of many chapters around the world that is working with the preparation of marketing students for post-secondary education and the career that comes afterwards. So as for Hawkfest, that is our biggest event of the year. That's coming up again September 23rd, 4 to 8 p.m. Be there. We'll have a lot of stuff. It's been going on for many years at this point, so it's a fairly well-established event that the community really loves. There's inflatables, food vendors, attractions. Kids and parents all love it. Sadly, no goldfish this year. We're replacing those with soda bottles, so look out for that. But yeah, it's held right in front of the North Campus front office area, the grass and the parking lot, that sort of thing. And yeah, there's carnival games and a lot of fun food, pretty much everything that you could enjoy from 4 to 8 p.m. on a Friday night, besides the football game. And yeah, so wristbands are $20 each, so that comes with tickets and access to many of the games and events throughout the event itself.
So this is our Hawk. Let me go back. That's okay. The last slide was our. There you go. This is our Hawkfest shirt design for this year. I've spent the past couple months working on it, and it's finally released, and it's been really fun having all the marketing students in Mr. Mills' classes wearing them and doing lots of promotions. It's a big part of DECA is promotion, and we spend a lot of time teaching that in Mr. Mills' class and in DECA. So now back to why Hawkfest. So the first part of Hawkfest that's really important to us is community service. Not only are we giving back to the community, but we're working with them. We have several different small businesses and nonprofits just coming to have booths at Hawkfest, and it's really exciting to work with them and bring the community closer together. I think that's honestly what Hawkfest is all about, is working with the community. Next, we have networking. So again, with those businesses, we gain lots of relationships with them. Vendors such as Rocky Rococo's and Paws we've been working with for several years, and they're also contenders and vendors at our marketing nights as well. Marketing nights are a smaller version of Hawkfest that we do around the girls and boys basketball games and sometimes hockey games as well in the spring. A lot of students like to come to those because you get to see the game and go to the event, which is fun, whereas Hawkfest, you kind of got to pick one before you transfer to the other. And attending exciting events through DECA just makes students want to get involved. I know as a freshman, like when I went to Hawkfest, it was just really exciting. And I was in DECA, but I wasn't super involved yet. And just coming to this point now as a senior, helping plan all of it, it's just really exciting. And lastly, I know people might not like to mention it, but it does look really great on your college essay and resume. We have several of our students that were in DECA now at very well-educated business programs such as Indiana. And I personally put it on my college essay and I actually wrote about it, and it's really, there's a lot to talk about. There's so many components to it, and it's just really exciting. Yeah, just to go off of Lily, I think Hawkfest really brings everybody together. We have a lot of different booths this year, which our sponsors can set up as well after they donated money. So just to get their name out there, which also helps us as marketing students to just learn how to help market businesses. We also have lots of carnivals, rides, games, just to help. So it's not only high school students or only parents, it's also a lot of little kids. There's food events like pizza, froyo, and yeah, it'll just be a lot of fun. So we also have, if we have sponsorship money left over, we will be giving it to Haws and Healthcare Heroes. Some of the money will also be going to marketing nights, marketing scholarships, and community service projects.
just to say, we typically have given about $5,000 to the top two. This year, the local healthcare heroes, it's new, cause is something that we've given to in the past fairly frequently. But we will typically give about $10,000 away to both of those charities, and then the remainder is just used for student scholarships for competition in the spring, and then for college scholarships for those seniors going on to college.
So yeah, that's our pretty much brief introduction to what DECA is and what Hawkfest is coming up September 23rd, 4 to 8 p.m. Be there, of course. Are there any questions at this time from anyone? I can hopefully answer anyone. Yeah, over there.
Isn't there a stage that students or teams go on and perform?
So we have an entertainment stage. That's one of the big components of it. So there's a variety of entertainment that goes on there, and it's usually themed around the theme of the event. So this year it's 80s dance party. So a lot of it will be 80s related and dance related. So for example, this year we have dance teams going on there. We have student talent shows, that sort of thing, as well as students that volunteer to come up and do like lip sync battles, which is newer this year. So yeah, it'll be a lot of fun watching all that happen on the entertainment stage this year. All right, any other questions out there?
I'm assuming you have best mullet contest as well?
We can add that, definitely. Are you going to be a competitor? No, I believe in you. You got it. Yeah.
Get that on the list.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah. All right. Anything? Oh yeah.
How many students are in DECA?
In Arrowhead specifically,
In Arrowhead,
or
yes.
I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but it's one of the largest clubs in Arrowhead. Do you know the exact number? Yeah.
I would say probably it's very active. We're at about 50 to 70 students. But when we go to competition, we end up taking about 50 to districts. And by the time we go to nationals in the spring, we're usually taking about 25 to 28 students.
So yeah, so a little thing on competition. Nationals is like the highest level you get to after you go from districts to state and everything like that. And we have one of the largest groups going to nationals around the world. So it's a fairly successful chapter in that regard as well. Yeah.
I saw that in the spring that you guys made a lot of waves in the social media reports. Can you just kind of share with the group of all your accomplishments during?
Sorry.
I think it was in Georgia.
Oh yeah, so last year's international competition was in Atlanta, and so we went there for like a few weekdays and over the weekend, and every student has their own competition category that they compete in, and they've all qualified very highly at state to get to that point, and so everyone competes there, and we have a lot of fun outside of competition as well, and we like to post that on our social media, both for marketing DECA in itself, but also just showcasing the fun we have at international competition. And so we went to things like the Coke Factory Museum. Some other chapters went to Six Flags. We went to a concert held in the Mercedes-Benz Stadium, and that was a lot of fun as well. So yeah, we're very active on social media platforms, and throughout competition, that's a lot of opportunities to make posts. So we do a lot of that through that season. Any other questions out there? All right, good. Thank you.
The next part of my superintendent report is another presentation, and this was actually by request from board members. As the board has learned, we have a program called Canvas. It's our learning management tool, and teachers will place their instructional materials in Canvas. So students have access, and parents also have access through an observer venue. We had last school year, we had 274 parents register to use Canvas. That's about 8.8% of our parent population. We're hoping that more parents sign up to use Canvas to keep informed with what's going on in the classroom. We always advise first to ask your child, ask your students, great dinner conversation. But board members had asked to see what Canvas looks like. So what do students see? What do parents see? And we had done this presentation, or Donna, I should say, did this presentation several months back, but with new board members and new community members here, we thought we would do that presentation again.
So Donna Smith is our fabulous Director of Library Media Technology, and she's going to explain Canvas.
Okay, and I just wanted to highlight some of our pages that are really great. We have a lot of great pages, but these are just several that are just slightly different that you can take a look at and see what people see. So this is actually the teacher view of Joe Paul's macroeconomics course. And if I switch it to the student view, you can see that he has it cleaned up nicely. And then, so this is his front page. So he guides the students through, has his week at a glance, which a lot of teachers do, but he does it in an interesting way, talking about the focus, as an agenda, and then homework or videos that they can access. The videos are actually the AP Central's videos. So those are logins. So students would have to log in with their parent in order to access those. And then he has his syllabus listed as well as modules. And you'll notice that a lot of people will have their modules, and then they will have as much as they're working on that the students need to see as to not overwhelm them with too much content, and also so that they don't get too far ahead, get confused. So it kind of keeps it clean for the students. Another example is Steve Schmidt's pre-calc. So he has buttons on his first page. He goes by chapters. So if you click on any of his chapters, you can click on chapter 2 and see all the things that they need to do for chapter 2. So it's nice and clean. It's a little bit different of an organization, but it works well. And all teachers go through all this with their students, so the students will know how things work. He does still keep everything back in modules, so you'll see a listing of things in modules by unit, so you can go through and really see what your student is learning. Our new Chinese teacher, Serena Powers, what I really like about hers is that she explains each of the areas to the parents or students. So at the top, it says the syllabus tab to the left has course expectations. You know, daily agenda is below. Go to the calendar. So she has a nice calendar set up. So if somebody was missing this day, they can go to that day, and it goes directly to that daily agenda with everything linked in there that they need to do. So nice and easy, clean, easy to understand pages. Tamra teaches a completely online class during the school year, so it's slightly different. I mean, sorry, during summer school, so it's slightly different during the school year. But she also has information at the top explaining how her page works, and then she'll have her week at a glance. And again, along the left-hand side, you can see the things that are available to students along the left nav, because they won't have the little eyeball with the cross through it. So if I go into the student view, you're going to see a cleaner look to that left nav. Again, so we don't overwhelm the students with too much on that left nav so that it's confusing for them. Liz Monkwitz and her modern lit class. Her week at a glance has things in each of the columns, identifying what they would be doing in class, what they need to do for homework, as well as having her modules listed. The top area generally saved for generic things throughout the year, and then moving into the units, and her units are organized according to book that they're studying. And then Chad Schatz. He does a couple of interesting things. He has buttons at the top for his assignments, daily class agenda, and current unit. And then in the assignments area, he uses the syllabus module, because what it does is it pulls together all of the assignments in Canvas and puts them in chronological order. You can also see a similar thing in the module area, where it's according to unit, but it's not just including the assignments. So he likes that for his students to refer back to assignments. And then his current unit module bumps over right to the unit that he's working on in his modules. And then he has his daily class agenda that just is kind of fleshed out a little bit more with some links. So that's a variety of pages from a variety of departments, but you can see everybody kind of leans on that front page to give people daily agendas, weekly schedules. They have their modules loaded with things according to units. So there is an organization that's pretty self-intuitive as you get into those pages. So do you have any questions about the organization?
How long has Canvas been in use at Arrowhead?
We've been using it for 7 years now.
When you rolled it out, was it a difficult process to teach the staff, or is it pretty intuitive, pretty easy?
It was pretty easy, but we were moving from Moodle to Canvas, and Moodle's almost just like modules and nothing else. So you didn't have all the pages, you didn't have the variety of assignments that you can do, so it's a little more robust. So I think there was a learning curve, but many of our staff had already been using Moodle, so they were kind of used to it, and they could actually import some of that information into it when we first started.
Do we just pay a license fee per year per teacher, or how does it?
Yep.
I just want to just add a couple comments.
All right.
I have a few kids that go to Arrowhead through the years, and I've seen the beginning of Canvas, or towards the beginning, and today it is a night-day difference. I think it's being utilized a lot more, and I think the pivotal point was during COVID, where kids were at home, they were relying on, seeing their teachers via video, grabbing assignments. So I think there was a night and day difference. So sometimes that first impression of Canvas is like, I don't understand it, but over the past few years, it's really been a great resource. And also, it's very helpful too when, like, my kids are absent from school or a class or something. It's an awesome resource. So it doesn't replace the in-person instruction, but at least it has the tools like, okay, this is the video that we saw, this is the handout that was provided. So it really helps them, when they do have to miss class, that it's available for them. And then also too, just for preparing for testing quizzes, to have that stuff there. If they need mom and dad on the side to help them out or quiz them, it's a great resource for all.
I just pulled up the page for, in our parent tech information, it shows how to become a Canvas observer. Our teachers will be pulling those parent codes for open house so that they can hand them out to parents who would like them. And then we're also sending parents some information in the newsletter on how to sign up for Canvas. And they can actually get those parent codes from their students as well. So any other questions? Oh.
No, just a comment. I thought a useful feature or function was, I'm as a parent able to get notifications.
Yes.
About assignments that have been set and when those assignments are completed. This is very useful. I don't think my son realizes I can see that.
Any other questions? Donna, thank you so much. I know at the risk of being somewhat redundant, we appreciate you coming back and presenting the overview. I think it's helpful not only to a number of newer board members, as well as hopefully to a lot of the parents in the audience. I think some of these tools can look a little daunting at the get-go, but then when Donna does it, it looks really easy. So hopefully we'll have more parents be able to utilize the tool.
You just add to, I know some colleges use this too for their course instruction.
Actually, every college in the UW system uses Canvas. And certainly other schools, private colleges as well, but the UW system has adopted Canvas, is my understanding.
That's not true.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, well, it was 5 years ago or so.
They did purchase it. I think some of them, like Madison, is incorporating Blackboard and Canvas together. Yep, so they're using components of Canvas, but for some reason they kind of swayed away from that. Yeah, they were at the Canvas conference as well. They did say they were using both.
That's the end of my superintendent report.
Thank you, Laura. Okay, with that, we're going to move on to comments from the public. Where I didn't have to read this before, I do have to read it now, unfortunately. It's lengthy. But these are the rules. The communications and comments from members of the public agenda item requires anyone wishing to speak to the board must be present and register on the sign-up form. A 3-minute time limit is enforced. Public comment is only accepted during this agenda item. Sharing of minutes with another person addressing the board is not permitted. Speakers should address the board as a whole, not individual board members, and shall remain polite and respectful. Only the board president may respond to the comments or questions. He or she has the authority to ask another board member or administrator to respond. Board members will not respond to public comments unless designated by the board president. The board president has the authority to cease any conversation at any time for any reason. Public comments will be taken under advisement if public comments are in regard to an agenda item when the board discusses that particular item during the meeting. The board may or may not address the comments, questions raised by the public. And lastly, only the board will discuss and or take action. There will be no citizen communications during the time of agenda topics. So with that, we will hear from Kevin Lewandowski.
Hi, everyone. I'm the school psychologist at North Campus, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak against the proposed name and gender policy, and also thank you for getting me out of bath time with my 2 kids tonight. With this policy, I think of some of the students I work with who identify as transgender, and I'm glad that they have parents that will have their back. So it will take some extra paperwork from the parents, a phone call from myself or a counselor to make sure things get in, and then they can get set up. So I'm here speaking on behalf of the students that the new policy is a potential life-changing deal for them, as well as the other people in our community. So research among transgender adolescents shows that the lack of parental support is associated with a lower quality of life and higher rates of depression. Being called by the incorrect name or gender can cause instant panic that will bring students to my office. For people who don't experience panic attacks, they can be hard to understand, but they are even harder to witness. Kids struggling to breathe as they can't get enough air into their body. I had one situation, and this is graphic, so I apologize, where a student was screaming in the corner of my office and digging into her forehead with her nails as blood was running down her face. The student graduated several years ago, but this situation still comes to mind often, and it humbles me to remember what some of these kids go through. I wish I was only here to talk about the potential increase in panic attacks that this policy could cause, but I'm more worried about our students dying by suicide. Adolescents who identify as transgender are nearly 8 times more likely than their cisgender peers to attempt suicide. So this policy would result in students, specifically those lacking parental support with this major piece of their identity, losing the opportunity to be themselves at Arrowhead. I understand better than most that a large number of our students engage in self-harm, and there are suicide attempts that we will never know about. The Youth Risk Behavior Survey from last year showed that roughly 350 students engaged in self-harm. And roughly 200 of our kids not only contemplated suicide, but had plans for how they would kill themselves. I'm grateful that in my 8 years here that we have not had a student die by suicide. But I am fearful that this new policy, which appears to single out students who need to feel supported the most, will end this streak. I wanted to make sure that I spoke up and supported our Arrowhead students that need us, and I hope that you will consider to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Garrett Galster.
Good evening. I am Garrett Galster. I encourage you to act tonight on reason, not on politics or bald rhetoric, when considering proposed policy 651 related to names and pronouns of students. I am connected to AHS and Heartland. I'm the father of a student here. I have 3 more children that I hope will attend. I helped coach hockey teams for about 10 years. And I practice law and manage a law firm right here in Heartland. I'm a lawyer, but I don't represent anyone here tonight. I provide this background not in any way to attempt to impress you. I'm doubtful that it does, but rather to impress upon you the foundation for my judgment of the fairness of voting no on the policy to maintain the status quo, especially considering legal issues, cost-benefit analysis, and secular public feedback. I care. On legal issues, the policy is unconstitutional and violates Wisconsin and federal law. The policy in all versions which I have seen is subject to legal attack on at least 2 bases, attacks I would personally support. First, the policy is discriminatory on its face, and teachers or staff that follow your policy could be fined for $1,000 each time they do so. Second, even if the policy appears facially neutral, it will have disparate effect on a minority of students. Just because you ask everyone to fill out the same form during registration does not mean it is non-discriminatory. Don't fool yourselves. The disproportionate negative effect on a minority of students makes it illegal, like prohibition of asking a person's age or marital status in a job interview. Other challenges exist. Regarding cost-benefit analysis, is the policy really a solution that's looking for a problem? Any as yet unidentified benefit of the policy will be outweighed by substantial emotional and potential physical costs to students that are not cisgender and do not have supportive families. These costs could be catastrophic, and any such emotional or physical scars, they're going to be on your hands, and you will have to live with that. Finally, with minimal outreach, we've got survey results that reflect the importance of a no vote on this policy. More than 180 adults, all residents or district parents, indicate that they do not support any publicly available version. Again, the ones that were properly posted at least 24 hours before this meeting. These signers may agree with some, all, or none of what I have said here. I'm not here to represent their interests directly, but rather to highlight the secular feedback on fairness and the importance of the no vote, and to emphasize that we care. In conclusion, at base, I care about all students, as you should, not just the majority. I urge each of you to undertake your own reasoned analysis and to leave a student's family discussion of any names or pronouns to their own timeline without forced state action. My concern is that adoption of this policy would be illegal at worst and inhumane at best. Please vote no.
Thank you. Next up, we'll hear from Eric Martin.
Hello, my name is Eric Martin, and I'm the father of 2 students in the Arrowhead School District. I live in Bayview Road in Stone Bank. I'm speaking today regarding policy 651. This policy needlessly targets and will disproportionately harm students in the LGBTQ and non-binary communities without any identifiable benefit. In attempting to solve an imaginary problem, you will be creating very real ones for students who are already at risk. As you've already heard, this is a population of children and young adults that are already 8 times as likely to attempt suicide and 6 times more likely to experience depression. They need support and acceptance, not marginalization and exclusion. It may not be safe for them to share this information with their parents. The school environment may be the only place that they can feel comfortable as they navigate their adolescence. forcing students to clear additional, and in some cases insurmountable hurdles just to be addressed in a way that makes them feel comfortable is at best tacit discrimination, and at worst fear and hate-based bigotry. As I'm sure the board is aware, the U.S. Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights has made it clear they will enforce Title IX prohibition of discrimination, including discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity. The district's focus plan states that the goal of fostering and nurturing positive learning culture, where learners will experience a collaborative and inspirational learning environment where intellectual, emotional, and social growth, motivation, and resilience are promoted and valued. In the district handbook, section 653 identifies that this district will recognize that belonging, safety, empowerment, collaboration, trust, and choice are a priority for all students in all environments. I truly struggle to understand how the board can even consider this policy in light of the clearly stated goals they've already adopted. The policy screams exclusion, stifles personal growth, oozes marginalization, and spits in the face of personal choice. These students already face challenges in bullying and lack of acceptance within the community, and some in their own homes. School may be their only safe place. My hope is the board follows its stated policy of not discrimination on these grounds and renews their commitment to ensuring that an education environment is free from discrimination for all students. Thank you for your time, and please keep Arrowhead safe for all students in the district.
Thank you, Brian. Abby Horn.
Good evening. My name is Abby Horn. I am the parent of a new freshman and the parent of an 8th grader who will be an incoming freshman from Northlake School. First of all, I want to say thank you to the board. I appreciate that you represent the constituency of our school, the parents, the families, and that you're not simply focused on special interest groups. I am here speaking to you because I am very supportive of the family and the fact that the parents have the rights to be a participant in their child's lives. Special interest groups, teachers, and the school board, teachers do not dictate what my child can or cannot do, and the fact you want to exclude me from those discussions potentially is challenging. So I want to say very sincere appreciation for both policy 334 and transparency in curriculum. We're very active in our child's education. We speak very often about the contents of what they're working in school, and knowing that ahead of time is critical for us to be able to be partners in education, which is so often shared by the school board and teachers. So very much in support of the transparency in curriculum. Regarding 651, very much I want to be a part of my child's life. If my child's having an issue, I want to know about it. It is not the right of a teacher, a school, or a special interest group to keep me from knowing what's going on in my child's life. People here are assuming that parents are bad guys, right? This is not an exclusionary tactic. This is an inclusive one. We want to be included as far as discussions that happen at school. We don't want to be excluded. It is our right to know what's going on because we have a duty to our children to support them, to be there for them, to help them. And if we don't know what's going on in their lives, that's impossible for us to do. Neither of these policies are against any of these communities. It is against parents. It is against inclusion of a parent in our child's life when we drop them off the school door. So I do appreciate the board's consideration of adopting and creating these policies so we create transparency and create a dialogue both within the curriculum as well as with our children when it comes to things that impact their health, safety, and welfare. This is not against bullying. I do not feel that this is going to create bullying. This is creating just a dialogue with parents. Okay. So again, I appreciate the transparency. I appreciate the discussion. And thank you very much for what you do. I know you're giving up a lot of time from your families dealing with these meetings, but so thank you very much.
Thank you, Abby. Next up is Kieran Rush.
So I'm Kieran Resch, and I'm a senior here at Arrowhead High School. I have identified as transgender for about a year and a half now, and I would prefer to not start with the darkness of it all. But the sad reality is that without the bad things, action doesn't happen most of the time. So I want to start off by saying that although a lot of people have mentioned mental health here today, it is a very important aspect that needs to be considered. And to do this, I first hand account last year was in the worst mental state I have ever been in as I was trying to figure out my identity. And things didn't go so great. But the faculty here at school helped me through it, and they supported me in all of the ways that they can. And I don't think that if they had helped me through everything going on with my identity and in my head, I might not be here today. But on a slightly better note, I have struggled with mental health. So finding good things at school is a very hard thing for me to do. But the first time ever that a teacher called me Kieran is probably going to be one of the most memorable things of my entire life, and genuinely made school so much easier, being able to come here every day and know that who I am and my identity was protected and secure through everything and everyone who told me that it wasn't. And that's a really important thing for students like me to have. And the thought of that not being in place is pretty scary. And especially with the fact that I am fortunate enough to have supportive parents, but a lot of students here are not. And if you don't have supportive parents at home, then it's very, very hard to get through things if you don't also have the support of school. Because the first 2 or 3 months that I identified as Kieran, I was not okay with telling my parents yet, because that would completely flip my whole world upside down. And I was just not ready for that. So I turned to the school, and it turned out to be some of the best months of my life. And just to be able to come here and be yourself and be confident in it is an amazing thing. And I really hope that that is never taken away. And I would like to think that Arrowhead High School will one day be a safe place for all students to be validated, heard, and secure about their identity, just like I feel. Thank you.
Now we'll hear from Ray Leland.
Hi, I'm Ray, and my pronouns are Deca, and I'm a student at this school. A couple of my friends and I are really concerned about this policy that you are trying to put in place, and some of them asked me to speak for them because they do not feel safe enough to speak for themselves. I will also be talking for myself for some of this. A quick disclaimer though, I'm covering some heavier topics that might be triggering for some individuals. And I'd like to start off by reading what my friends asked me to say. At the age of 8, my father had threatened me and my siblings that if we ever came home and told him that we were a member of the LGBTQ+ community, he would grab one of his shotguns and shoot us. This has affected me greatly throughout my life because I myself identify as an LGBTQ+ person. I will always carry this memory, this hatred, with me. I accepted my identity a while ago, but many others still struggle to do so. Another one of my friends asked me to read the following. My mother and I disagree on a variety of topics, trans rights being one which weighs heavily on our relationship as I am non-binary. I remember one day in 8th grade when my mother and I were arguing about social issues in the kitchen. I was backing into the corner of the room, crying and shaking.
afraid of the temper that always comes out when we are discussing these issues. My mother pulled a knife out of the knife block to her left, raised it towards me from a distance, and said, "I could kill you right now, easily." I begged her to put the knife down, to which she responded with an eye roll and slowly put the knife away. The issues we are talking about had nothing to do with my identity at all. If that was the level of anger with discussing topics that were objective and not about her own daughter or child, I don't really want to think about what that conversation would look like if the school informed her that I'm going by a different name and preferred pronouns. We aren't just talking about hypothetical situations here. This policy you are trying to enact will put the lives of these children, your students, in danger. If a teenager hasn't told their parents that they are trans or that they use different pronouns and prefer a different name, they most likely have a reason, whether it's for their mental health or physical health, or even their personal safety. They still have a right to keep that information away from their parents if they do not feel safe. This policy would force teens to choose between being themselves and their safety. We aren't talking about statistics or people who will never walk these halls. We're talking about real students here. Your job is to educate students and make them feel safe, not make them feel unsafe and live in fear of how people will treat them if they find out. This is the second year in a row that we, as students, are telling you that you need to stop promoting the bullying and abuse that your students receive in the halls and start taking decisive action to prevent it. As of today, I know that 2 people today were called homophobic slurs in the halls. How about you focus on that instead? Thank you for listening to all of us, and I hope that you make the right decision.
Thank you, Ray. I'm concerned I'm gonna slaughter this last name, but it's Abigail Craven.
Hello. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the board. My name is Abigail Craven. I'm a senior here at Arrowhead High School, and I'm the president of the school's GSA, the Gender Sexuality Alliance. I was not originally planning on speaking this evening, but upon hearing some of the statements made by many of the courageous students here tonight, I was inspired to say just a few words, mainly reiterating points that my good friend Ray just made. This proposed policy, would force many students at Arrowhead High School to make the choice between being unashamedly and unafraid themselves in the presence of their trusted peers and teachers, and their safety and their personal well-being at home. It's an unfortunate reality, but ignoring it does not make it untrue. The school's motto for as long as I have known about Arrowhead, and I have had 2 older siblings go through this school as well, has been one team. The student body and the staff are one team. We're all one team. And yet specific groups of students are consistently othered, ostracized, and oppressed by policies much like 651. That's not to say that the board has bad intentions or that they don't have the best interests of the students in heart. It's to say that there are consequences that the board is not yet aware of because they don't have to live these experiences every single day. If the board would like to continue to represent Arrowhead's motto of one team, then I feel it is absolutely crucial that they vote no to policy 651 because we cannot be one team until we can be ourselves. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Evelyn. Sarah Ferguson.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing us to speak tonight. I'm sure I might be familiar to some people who've seen at the middle school board meetings. Today I received 6 notifications from campus about different grades and different assignments that were turned in by my son. I would hope that I would receive, if I'm receiving 6 notifications today in campus, which is a wonderful program, that I would be able to receive a notification that my son might be going through something and there have been changes that have been made to him, so I could be a parent. I understand with these other students who've come up here, in any way, if there's any danger, especially physical at home, that should be brought immediately for help and actually dealt with by the police to take care of that, because no child should have to suffer through that. But I can guarantee you there's a lot of students out there who do not know how to deal with the situation either, who are afraid to actually speak in the hallways because they're afraid they might hurt someone's feeling and misgender them, or what they should do about it. And just wondering in the policy of 651, I as a parent would like to know, but also for the different children out there, what would the consequences be if someone accidentally misgendered someone, especially if someone has a fluid gender? What happens to those other students in those circumstances? Because it may not be on purpose. It may just be something that's overwhelming them and they can't wrap their head around either. But for me as a parent, I would want to know if my child just decided to change something about themselves, because I believe in transparency, which leads into also policy 334. I think having full transparency in our children's curriculum is very important. My child suffers from severe ADHD and he forgets a lot, which is why I love having Canvas, and I'm able to help him out and keep him on track. Usually it's a reminder, but also to actually see the curriculum and to make sure he's following where he should be as he's getting used to adapting to things. But I really want to make a point that any child out there is experiencing any type of physical danger or even mental danger, that is brought to the school immediately, and that is what that's for. But in 651, I would like to know what's going on with my child so I can help as much as possible. So.
Thank you so much. Ed Horn.
Edward Horn, I have a son here and another in the 8th grade that will be coming in next year. I want to read all that information from the parents. The kids are minors, and we're here to support them. And if something came up, I want to be there to help. So, you can know. Thank you.
Thank you. Stephanie Kozadowski.
My name is Stephanie Kozadowski, and I use she, her pronouns. I am the mom of a 2021 graduate and an Arrowhead senior. I'm here to speak in objection to policy 651. I have already sent written correspondence to all of you, and in addition, I was there at the policy meeting last week to discuss, when we were discussing all of this. And you say that the need to enact this policy 651 is because parents deserve to know how their kids are being addressed in school. We all, I think, can agree that we want our kids to tell us things. If they're not telling us something that's this important, or they don't feel that they can tell us these things, that's not on the school. That's on us as parents. Last week, during the policy meeting, Adam Bolt explained the process that they use when kids come to them. They're not asking them to keep it a secret. They're counseling these kids who come to them to use a different name or to use different pronouns. They're encouraging these kids to talk to their parents. What about this practice needs to be legislated in policy? Adopting this policy risks putting a student already in a vulnerable state at potential further risk, and isn't the job of the school board to work for all the students. Why are you trying to make a policy that elevates anyone, in this case parents, over the student? Again, if my child cannot come to me and feel safe, that's something for me to work on, not for the school board to legislate. I would much rather have the school on the side of my child than on mine. Please vote no.
Thank you, Stephanie. James Norris? Oh, I'm so sorry. James Norcross.
Hello, my name is James Norcross. I'm currently a junior at Arrowhead, and I would like to address policy 651, student name and pronoun change. A policy that I believe requires greater input before further decision making. Today, I hope to educate you all on why this will be an unfortunate policy if set into effect. As of 2019, nearly a third of the United States does not support transgender rights. This includes parents whose support is required in this policy if a student desires a different name or pronoun to be used in class. Transgender students who will need the support that they do not have to be called by their correct name and pronouns will instead endure forced gender dysphoria daily at school. Keep in mind that one's name and pronouns are referred to more at school than at home. Among those with gender dysphoria, studies show that 31% have attempted suicide due to it. 31% have tried to kill themselves because of this. The policy being voted on today only worsens their dysphoria. It puts these students with unsupported parents in an unsafe environment. Therefore, the risk of suicide in your students only increases because of your policy. As a high school, Arrowhead must put its students first, students' mental health first, and put students before their parents in this policy because it affects them and their safety, these students. There is no reason for Arrowhead to ruin its reputation as a fantastic school. There is no reason for Arrowhead to risk the safety and lives of its students. There is no reason for you to enact policy 651. I hope you keep this in mind today. Thank you.
Thank you. Nicholas Talon.
My name is Nick Talon, and I am a senior at Arrowhead High School. As you have heard today, LGBT students in our community have been tormented and ridiculed with severe consequences on their collective mental health. This sentiment is not just expressed with their anecdotes, but with empirical research as well. A study by the National Library of Medicine has found that 86% of transgender youth have reported being suicidal in the past year, and 56% have attempted suicide. You don't need me to tell you that these numbers are beyond alarming. Transgender and non-binary children are rejected, ostracized, and driven to suicide by social pressures pushing for unabating gender and sexual conformity. But we can right this trend and easily at that. Research and data show that the most influential factor, far more reliable and practical than medication or therapy in preventing LGBTQ self-harm, is acceptance. Admission of one's sexual orientation by friends, family, and community is by far the most dependable way to save the lives of LGBT children, and it can reduce suicide rates by up to 50%. That is thousands of children each year that can be saved by using the right names, pronouns, and terms. This is where the principles of humanitarianism conflict with this policy. Instead of affirming the identity of the most victimized and vulnerable members of our community, it assaults their individuality and instills a feeling of incompatibility with their peers and family. It destroys their right to self-determination and to a safe education for a parent's right to control them. This policy is an antithesis to every standard integral to the idea of local government and a school board. I believe the members of the school board are altruistic at heart and only wish to provide students with a safe and efficient educational experience. But there is no sugarcoating this policy. If implemented, it will aid in the severe degradation of mental health for students who need your support the most. I urge every member of the school board not to stifle and repress the students of your constituency, but heed the advice of empiricism and benignity and reject this policy in full.
Thank you. Beth DeRosier. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Beth Rosier, and I'm a 36-year resident of this community and a 30-year teacher at Arrowhead High School. I attended the last board meeting in August, and I was pleased to see that the school board was willing to listen to the community with an open mind. Thank you for the opportunity to voice our opinions and to influence policy. I'm extremely proud to be a teacher at Arrowhead High School, and I'm blessed to experience the ups and downs of 171, sometimes energetic, sometimes exhausted high school students. Some of them are here tonight, I think will be exhausted tomorrow morning. I'm not here today to address the curriculum transparency policy under consideration, although I believe that it is a manufactured crisis and one that will create an inordinate amount of work for me personally, as I am not a digital native. In other words, I graduated from college before the advent of the personal computer. I was lucky enough to purchase my first typewriter for $150 my third year of teaching. Before that, I hand wrote everything. I will point out that over the course of my career, I have had to adapt and have done my best to keep up with new technology, a skill which became particularly important during the recent pandemic. Change happens. We have to adapt. But I am here tonight to address the student name and pronoun use policy 651. I'm here to be a voice for the students who this policy most affects, and that is transgender students. Some of these students may be downright fearful to speak for themselves. Adolescence can be a stressful and confusing developmental stage. According to a study sponsored by the National Institute of Health in 2022, 82% of transgender individuals have considered killing themselves, and 40% have attempted suicide. I guess we've heard all different numbers this evening, but they all are unbelievably high. With suicide deadly highest among transgender youth. A friend of mine who has a son who's gay has a stock answer for those who make statements such as, "I don't know anyone who's gay." Her answer is, "That's because they don't trust you enough to tell you." A perception exists that the number of LGBTQ people has increased in recent years. Perhaps that is because they have begun to believe that the world would accept them and that it was safe to express their feelings. Historically, LGBTQ people have been subject to discrimination and ridicule. School is a place where students should feel safe. Imagine adding to the angst of adolescence the constant fear of bullying and social ostracism simply because you want to be who you are. How can a student like that concentrate enough to learn in my classroom? Students are more likely to learn from a teacher who creates a welcoming environment and whom they trust. Transgender students were beginning to trust that at least the adults in their school would accept them. This policy is like pulling the carpet out from under them. As a teacher, I will be forced to refer to students by a name they feel is a dead name. This will inevitably destroy the trust they have in me as the adult in the room, and even worse, do considerable damage to their mental health. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Dawn. Jess LaValle.
Hello, my name is Jess LaValle. I'm a senior here at Arrowhead and I use she, her pronouns. Before I begin, I would like to thank the school board for the opportunity to speak tonight. Tonight, I would like to speak on policy 651. Policy 651 that the Arrowhead School Board has proposed regarding the use of student-chosen pronouns and names is incredibly dangerous to many students who may identify as transgender or non-binary. I'm here tonight to pose an important question to you, the members of the school board. Arrowhead High School, as much as we hope for it to be, is not a safe environment for all students. If the student would like to identify themselves using a certain set of pronouns or a different chosen name, why does this matter to you, the school board? Use of pronouns or chosen names in the classroom are used solely to make the student more comfortable in the classroom environment and therefore improving their capability to learn. Studies continuously show that students learn best when they have a good relationship with their teachers. A teacher using a student's preferred name or pronouns helps to enhance this connection between teacher and student instead of driving a wedge between them. With more comfortable students in a place where they feel as if they can be themselves, they will thrive educationally. On top of this, the school board is here to make school an easier and safer place for students to learn. High school is already such an uncomfortable time for many students, so why make it harder for students who are already struggling? Why discriminate against students who are learning more about themselves by exploring their gender orientation? Finally, if a student's parent does not support their gender orientation, school may be the only place where they can be themselves. Why take away this safe place or force an unsafe environment at home with the student's parent? Overall, this policy does not benefit the student body, and the students are the sole purpose for having a school board in the first place. Voting to implement either version A or version B of policy 651 would be going against the school board's very purpose, which is to support, protect, and provide a safe environment for students. I strongly encourage all of you to vote against policy 651 tonight for the overall benefit of the students. Protecting your students. That's your job after all, right? Thank you.
Now we'll hear from Katie Herman.
Hello, good evening. My name is Katie Herman. I am an English teacher here at Arrowhead, and I'm also a resident of the district. And I'm going to be very concise. I thought it would be appropriate that we incorporate a poem tonight. As an English teacher, that's kind of how I speak. So I wanted to just preface it by saying that on a regular basis, I encourage my students to enact their moral courage and stand up for each other and support each other. And I feel I would be an absolute hypocrite if I were not here tonight to speak for them. And so I would like to read you the poem called First They Came. It was written by Pastor Martin Niemöller, the German theologian, who reflected on the Holocaust. And the poem goes like this. First they came for the communists, and I did not speak out, because I was not a communist. Then they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out, because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out, because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out, because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me. So I'm, as I said, I'm here to speak out for my students that I love dearly and care about. My first year as a teacher, almost 20 years ago now, I had a young girl die by suicide. She was a freshman, and she was a member of the LGBTQ community. And I will never forget this wonderful young woman that had so much life to live. And so I'm just asking you board members, you have a very privileged position in our community, that you consult your own conscience before you consider voting for this policy 651. Thank you.
Chris Adson.
Thank you very much. I'm probably one of the older parents that have two little pipsqueaks. They're only 3 years old, so they're completely unaware of all this yet. But I still wanted to come and be involved. So I'm an older dad and waited my whole life to be a dad, and I just absolutely love it. I want to be involved with every little thing that they do in support of whatever they do. And they're also a boy and girl twin, so it's really cool. I've got one that sometimes they both play with trucks and sometimes they both play with dolls, and I encourage it all the way. So it's really fun to watch. Regarding the two policies, one, as an older dad again, it's never really had kids before today, or before these two. I just want to be involved in everything. So I love the curriculum thing. I would just love to be involved, and I'd love to see it. I do realize that though it could mean more work for one of the teachers. So something to keep in mind, if you do vote for it, be prepared. We might have to pick up some money for that. Well, next year there could be an exodus. We got to pay some money. We got to get more teachers. So that's one thing to consider, but I would like to see it. Regarding the name or pronoun, I named my kids Gino and Gemma, good Italian names from our background. And if they want to change it someday, God bless, good for them. But they're my kids, and that's their names for now. So if they did want to have a different name or be referred to differently, I would love to know about it so that I can take care of my kids and help them. And I realize that there could be other parents that maybe don't think that way, and maybe wouldn't support their kids making name changes or being referred to differently. And if there is any kind of a dangerous situation, I do hope that the board of the school district has policies in place to refer to the correct authorities to get involved and make that home life safe. The thing that I struggle with a little bit, somebody mentioned bullying earlier, and my fear is, how do you deal with bullying? You call the parents, or do you just deal with the kids? If you're calling the parents to say, hey, this kid's bullying somebody that has a different pronoun, why are you calling the parent for that, but not keeping them involved in their own kid's life? If you call me to say, hey, can you, or a form, can I take your kid off campus, take him somewhere else? You're asking for my permission for that, but not for other things. So there's some logic here I'm struggling with, just listening. If my kid gets hurt, you call me, you don't just make up medical decisions for them. And if they're truant or their grades are suffering, I would imagine let parents know. Again, my kids are only 3, so I don't know yet. I'm still looking. So it's just, for me, I would like to know, because I would be one of those parents that would be very supportive of whatever my kids do. Again, especially with a boy and a girl, if they want to switch roles, I don't care. I would love them either way. One of each either way. But I would like to be involved. And again, if there are parents and family situations where they do have to worry about safety, then I encourage you to talk about that as well, to what policies you can put in place to make sure that those kids are safe, because that is the most important thing, that they are safe. So whatever policy you do, whatever direction you go, keep the safety of the kids and the families in mind, but I would like to know. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. T. Thank you so much. I'm so sorry.
Hi, my name is Molly. I have 3 kids that will eventually be here for high school. Being a mom is my life, and to think of one of my kids emotionally struggling, being confused and feeling alone, and not coming to me breaks my heart. And I think a woman said earlier that it's on us if we have kids that are not feeling comfortable coming to us. And I agree with that. However, it doesn't necessarily mean you're a bad parent or a dangerous parent. How on earth can I make that connection with my child, or fix what I'm doing that's making them not want to come to me, and help them by being eliminated from the equation? I'm their parent, they're a minor, they're going through something major. You cannot eliminate. It's not okay. So yes, I understand that there are, again, like Chris said, parents that are not going to be supportive or loving in a situation like this. But you can't just assume that that's the majority, because I don't think that is the majority. Parent has to be involved when a child is a minor, no matter what, period.
Thank you so much. Haley Sweeney.
A little bit longer to bottle up here than usual. Thank you so much for allowing us all to speak. My name is Haley Sweeney. I have 3 kids and one that will be coming very shortly. Hopefully not on your carpet. I just want to start out and say adolescence is hard for everybody that's going through that period. The developing mind, body, soul, and character are all things that will continue to grow and change for years, even after kids graduate. But high schoolers are still under the legal guardianship of their parents. They're not fully developed adults. They have so much to learn, grow, and know. And time is both healing, and with it comes many learned lessons. But there's reasons why many legal rights are not granted to adolescents. As a parent, I want to be involved in the decision-making of my kids. And I truly empathize with all students, both unsupported parents, those who suffer from depression, bullying, and mental health issues. It's a silent struggle and often a silent killer, but there is hope, and keeping your families out of that is not the answer. You need to include the parents, you need to include the families. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. John Norcross.
I'll be brief. John Norcross, parent of the child and assistant. We're not going to solve our problems by policy. We're not going to solve all the problems by having more procedures, more documents. Parents are already involved. Anyway, that's my preamble. As a parent, I would like the board to vote no on policy 334 on curriculum transparency and on policy 651 on student name and pronouns. Or if we can't vote no, send them back to committee. Regarding policy 334, we already have curriculum transparency. As we saw in Canvas, we have no interest in putting more work onto our teachers. It's more than just one. And we also don't want a policy put forward that seems to operate from a place of suspicion. I trust our teachers. Regarding policy 651, you've heard a lot on this already. I want to look forward and offer something helpful. I have emailed you on this before. Our board has missed 2 crucial steps in refining and strengthening policy that works to support all of our students. First of all, we have not strengthened our school's policies on non-discrimination. We have policies that are inconsistent with respect to protected classes and categories, sexual orientation, gender identity, and even citizenship status are either missing or used inconsistently across policies, including policy 222, professional staff hiring, which is missing gender and gender identity. Policy 333, the educational gag order on CRT, but on non-discrimination within curriculum, we need to add sexual orientation, gender identity, and perhaps citizenship. Policy 513, equal opportunity employment and non-discrimination, we need to add gender and gender identity. And policy 660, student scholarships and awards, add gender and gender identity as protected classes. The second step would be engagement and involvement of the students, parents, and educators in defining the problem and exploring the solution space. There are students and parents who will be willing to help. There will also be teachers. I'm sure you have only to ask. Thank you.
John Morgan.
Good evening. My name is Shana Morgan, and I am the program lead for social studies at Arrowhead High School. First, I'd like to thank the board for allowing the staff to share our input into the transparency policy through the survey. I would also like to thank you for taking seriously many of our concerns and comments and modifying the policy accordingly. Recently, a version B was created that includes additional language not found in version A. The portion I'm referring to is this. It starts out with parental access may be provided, but the piece I'd like to focus in on is when a parent living outside the geographic area of the school district requests the opportunity to inspect the materials, the school district can contact a school near the non-resident parent, send the school materials, and make arrangements to have the parent inspect them locally. Well, I can make assumptions that this is meant for parents of Arrowhead students living outside the district in reference to copyrighted materials. The language chosen in the policy does not state that. Rather, it states that, quote, when a parent living outside the geographic area of the school district, end quote, leaving the door open for interpretation that any parent anywhere, people who are not stakeholders in our district, can request to inspect our instructional materials. I find this unnecessary, and I urge you to omit or clarify the language in this policy. Many of us have been transparent and continue to support transparency of curriculum. Should the policy be implemented, I urge you to have flexibility and patience as you are requesting people to take on a monumental task. While personally, I already have most of my materials posted on Canvas, not all staff are in the same position. Many teachers teach 3 or 4 different classes a day, sometimes 5, with only 80 minutes of prep time to conduct all of their lesson planning, grading, data updating, and of course, what we're all here for, to help students, not to mention those few minutes to use the facilities. Our new staff are teaching courses for the very first time. In social studies in particular, we discuss current events, which continually need to be updated. Our global relations class, so students vote each semester on what topic they want to study. So curricular materials will be continually changing. For those who do not already have their materials on Canvas, it truly can be and will be a monumental and cumbersome task that you are asking our teaching staff to do. It will take away from time we can dedicate to our students. Speaking of students, that's what we're all here for. So in closing, I want to give a big round of applause to our brave students that spoke this evening. I was nervous, as some of you can tell, to come and speak on transparency. I can't even imagine how nervous they were to speak on issues of transgender rights. It makes no difference to me in my classroom what name or pronouns I use with students in my class, while it makes all the difference to them. School is their safe place, and it should remain a safe place for our students. Let's keep it that way.
Alexandra Schneider.
Good evening. My name is Alexandra Schweitzer. I
So
have,
sorry.
no, that's okay. I have 3 kids, one's in college and 2 would like to attend Arrowhead. I am also the Wisconsin chapter president of the nonpartisan parent and child activist group, No Left Turn in Education. It is our mission to reclaim American education and restore it back to the fundamental discipline of objective thinking by educating, empowering, and engaging students, parents, and the community, with emphasis on the role of the parent as the primary educator of the child. I am here tonight to briefly tell you the story of David Reamer. He is the quintessential gender studies case that every school board member, parent, teacher, administration representative, elected official, or government bureaucrat should know about before making any decisions on pronouns, gender ideology, and quite honestly, engaging in discussions on comprehensive sex education. Bruce Reamer was born to 17-year-old parents in Winnipeg, Canada in 1966. When he was 8 months old, he and his identical twin brother, Brian, were scheduled for circumcision. Bruce went first, and a general practitioner filling in for a regular surgeon made the decision to use electricity to perform the procedure. As a result, Bruce's penis was burned off. Bruce's parents struggled for over a year until they heard of a sex researcher named Dr. John Money of Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore. Money, in an effort to prove that gender depends on how a child is reared rather than the sex an individual was born in, advocated for removing the remainder of the boy's male genitalia and prescribing female hormones. Bruce was 2. Very young, in an idealistic world we can only dream of, the Reamers agreed. Bruce quickly became Brenda, and his progress was compared to that of his identical twin brother, Brian. Brenda struggled greatly throughout her adolescence, often telling her parents that she wanted to climb trees and play with cars, not put on dresses and play with dolls. At the age of 15, Brenda went to her parents and told them that she believed that she was, quote, born wrong, and that she in fact was a boy. Against the demands of Dr. Money, she was told the truth. As you can imagine, the shock reverberated through his family, but they made it through. Bruce, who became Brenda, was now David. He underwent surgery to have the breasts he grew because of the hormone therapy Money put him on removed and his penis constructed from muscle and tissue cartilage. Eventually, David married and adopted his wife's children, leading a pauper's life in Winnipeg. David also attempted suicide 3 times, as the demons that chased David and his brother were very strong and very dark. Brian drank himself to death in 2002 at the age of 36. 2 years later, separated from his wife and children, facing the long-term health problems from the damaging radical drugs he was put on at the age of 2, when he was 38, Bruce ended his life. I tell you this tragic story because this should end the debate of allowing a child to change their identity with or without parental consent. The young adolescent mind is just not equipped to handle something like this, and frankly, something that is statistically so rare, it needs to be handled gently, privately, methodically, and under medical supervision, not in the halls of school. Thank you.
Thank you, Howard. Mary Else?
Most of you know me, and my name is Robert Angeli, and I live in the district. I wasn't planning on speaking tonight, but as most of you know, I've been volunteering my time here to record the school board meetings for almost the last 5 years. And something I've heard in common again tonight that I've heard over and over in previous board meetings is the harassment these children are getting in school. This should not be happening. It's been addressed over in the 5 years that I've been recording. I've witnessed it, and it's still coming up. I don't know why this problem has not been solved. So I would highly recommend that that's one of the things that this board will address. I know you have a lot on your plate, but this board should address this because I'm telling you, I've heard this for 5 years, and the problem has not been solved. No one, no human being should be harassed in school. This should be a safe place, and it's got to start right there. Thank you.
Thank you. Mary Else?
Thank you so much for listening. I've listened to a lot of people that have talked, and I want to make mention with regard to the curriculum. I am a human resource generalist here. I know how hard it is to find great administrators, great teachers, and as a parent of 4 kids, 3 of which have graduated from Arrowhead and had a phenomenal education here, I can say that if I ever had a problem or question about anything my kids have been learning about, I have always been able to contact the teacher directly. I've never even had to go to the administrative staff. I feel like asking for the teachers to put down all of their bibliography on Canvas is a lot of busy work. And my concern is that we have a great staff. I don't hear any problems that have come up from the board meetings that I've attended. And I feel that with the lack of supply of teachers, we could look at our teachers and say, boy, they might go somewhere else where they don't have to do what I would call busy work. Busy work to satisfy, I don't know who. Again, I feel like if as a parent, I have an issue with something that my child is learning, that I would be able to go to the teacher directly and either avoid them reading a book or whatnot. I don't feel like to ask for the entire staff of teachers to provide curriculum information on Canvas is an appropriate use of their time when they are already very, very bogged down with general education of our students. The second thing with regard to gender, I would just hope that because we are voters in the village of Heartland, that you would consider all of our voices be heard, and that the policies that we've had in place have been fine. I have 4 children, and I have talked to them all about gender and all of this, and they just want kids to be accepted. They don't want this to be highlighted. And sometimes I feel like it's more of a political stand than it is the need of, or the, I guess, the help or loving education of our children. So I would just ask that you would consider just keeping our policy the way that it is, because I don't feel like it needs to be changed. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Christina Feliz.
I apologize real quick. Mary else, is that her name?
Yes, Mary
I
Alice.
thought I heard you say anyone else.
Thought we were happy to hear from you. And Mary was so polite. I think we're just fine.
Hi, I'm Christina Feliz. I've been a Heartland resident for 14 years. I have a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 9-month-old. I also just started teaching here at Arrowhead about a month ago. I taught in a neighboring district for about 17 years, but I live here and I wanted to bring my efforts to serve students to my home community here at home. And so I'm here to speak about my concern about policy 651, both as a teacher for my students, for the graded students here tonight who spoke up, and for those that they represent, as well as for my own children who in about 9 years will be Arrowhead students. And I want to start with an anecdote. So today in my class, students were discussing sort of the pre-reading activity, the extent to which our environment, so where we are and how we were raised, the extent to which that defines our identity. And one of my very astute students mentioned, and I'm paraphrasing here, but I want to remember well what the student said, that while they're young, they really soak up what they learn from their parents. But as they get older, their brains develop. They start having their own ideas, and then they get phones, and they can use their phones to learn about their own interests, and their identities continue to develop that way. And so the question that comes to my mind here is, at what age do we allow our children to be their own people and to make their own choices? And I think that's a really tough question, and I think maybe that's kind of really what we're trying to get at here. And I don't know the answer. But I do know that my 5-year-old who's starting kindergarten is making lots of choices without me being there to help guide him. And it's terrifying. And I think I'm gonna be dealing with this as long as my kids are kids. I think that's what parenting is. But I do think that, and to the parents who have these concerns that they want to be involved, oh my gosh, I do too. If I found out my child was dealing with identity issues, or if I didn't find out, but if my child was dealing with these issues, I'd want to know about it. But if I wasn't the person they felt comfortable talking to, I owe a huge debt of gratitude to the school staff, whether it's our counselors, our school sites who are here, our admin, our teachers, whoever they felt comfortable telling. I would owe such a huge debt of gratitude to those people for being safe people for my kids to talk to. And I know that the staff would care for my child as I've cared for hundreds of children as a teacher, that they'd counsel my child to keep them safe. And I'm going to say that again, that they would do everything they could to keep my kids safe. If I wasn't that safe person for my kid, for whatever reason, I would be so grateful that they found a safe person to talk to. And so I wonder why we would make any policy that would create a less safe environment for any kid. And to the parents who want to be involved, my fear is that this policy would not help you to be involved. In fact, what would happen is you still wouldn't be involved, but also now the school wouldn't be involved either, because the child would be too afraid to even tell anyone at the school because they would be afraid then the school would tell their parents. And so then what would happen is that child would become a statistic, and you've heard the statistics already said, self-harm and suicide and suicidal thoughts and things like that. And we certainly don't want that. So I would implore you to please vote no to help keep all our kids safe. Thank you.
Okay. Ryan Gonzalez.
Hello, my name is Brian Gonzalez. I'm a senior at Arrowhead. Some of the students and staff may know me, and I definitely recognize some faces here. But what a lot of people don't know about me is that I'm transgender. Over the summer, I opened up to my father about my gender dysphoria. I opened up to him about how I thought that people were lucky to be born as women, and that I thought that no man actually wanted to be born as a man. I told him how I changed myself for others every day and how unhappy it made me feel. I told him how I would look into the mirror every day and hate the person staring back at me. I wrote a 6-page essay about how I've always felt terrible to have been born as the male sex. And all my father did when he read it was laugh. I told him how ever since I opened up to my circle of friends about being transgender and found a supportive group of people to be around, I was able to feel more comfortable in my own skin. I got more motivation in school and was overall happier and more stable. But all he could retort, to say it nicely, is that it was BS. My stepmother claimed she would be supportive of me if I were trans. She said she'd take me out to paint my nails and help me shop for clothes and affirm my gender. The same thing that many parents are saying here today. However, when I came out, she fulfilled 0 of these promises. Despite being pro-LGBT, she could not fathom having a transgender child. It crushed me. Having parents that I was joking with just days before tell me that my feelings aren't valid and that they don't want to help me be more comfortable in my own skin creates a pain unlike any other. Luckily, that pain doesn't necessarily need to follow me to school. I have supportive friends who are willing to help me combat my feelings of gender dysphoria and who are willing to use new pronouns and a new name. A step above that, however, are the teachers. When I felt a lack of support from my guiding figures at home, I turned to the guiding figures at school. They gave me the liberty and support to help me feel comfortable and safe in class. If this policy passes, it will force me and other transgender students to carry this pain from home. It will force us to be in an unsupportive environment. It will force those of us already struggling at home to struggle at school as well. It will be Arrowhead's way of telling us that our parents' satisfaction takes precedence over our own emotions and well-being. As MLK said, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. It may not be this specific school board, or the next, or even the one after that, but if passed, this policy will be repealed. I ask you to not allow this to happen in the first place. I ask you, the school board, to vote no to draft 651. Thank you.
Thank you, Dawn. We have reached the end of the sign-up sheet. I just wanted to open it up. If there is anyone left that didn't sign up, that would in fact still like to step up, please feel free.
Hi, I'm Ryan Ferris. I'm the daughter of Chris Ferris, as probably everyone knows. I just wrote what I'm about to say, so bear with me. It's very jumbled. As someone who was forced to come out by a friend, I was very scared to tell my family. Thankfully, my family was supportive, but some aren't. I've dealt with self-harm and mental health issues due to the fact that I couldn't accept myself, even with a supportive family. But what about the kids that don't have that? My main point is, if you could save one child from dying by denying these policies, why wouldn't you? Thank you.
Is there anyone else? Please.
I don't know if I'm too small for my. Hi, I'm Alan, senior at Arrowhead Union High School. I'd like to propose that we vote no for the upcoming policy that which everyone's talked about tonight. By demographics, I'm a straight white guy from white country. I should be really the last one to care about these issues, but here I am talking in front of everyone because as a student, as a person, and as a member of this community, I care about the well-being of our students. That's the school board's job to represent the students in the school in all matters that would benefit them. It is your job to do so as well. As the board, you should promote policy that benefits all students and not just a certain subset of students, especially not targeted discriminatorily towards a small subset of students. People complain when the classroom is too hot or cold and that they can't focus on a test. And now imagine if you couldn't focus because you're thinking about killing yourself due to gender affirmation issues. That's a much more serious issue, one that needs to be dealt with caution and care. So in conclusion, I suppose I don't have much of a formal speech. I wrote this up in about like 2 minutes before I walked up here. An unnecessary policy lays waste to our time and resources, but a harmful policy lays waste to our students. Thank you.
Is there anyone else?
Hi, everyone. I'm Gustavo Chaviano. I direct choir here at Arrowhead High School. I wasn't originally going to speak tonight, but in honesty, I was quite moved by all the students that had the courage to step up here in front of people that they don't know, in front of adults, to express their feelings and things that are quite sensitive. So I felt that I needed to come up here and say something. I didn't plan anything, so I might ramble a little bit. But as teachers, it is our job to support students, whoever they are. And we see students every day from all different walks of life that come from all different types of economical backgrounds and carry all different types of burdens. And it is hard enough to be a teenager in this world, having to deal with trying to conform to what your friends want, to what everybody wants you to be, than to place this sort of burden on them that this policy is going to do. I think that it's great for students to be able to talk to their parents about this. I don't think any of the staff here, or I don't think anybody here wants students not to communicate with their parents about these sensitive issues. We want that. We want that collaboration at home that supports what we do here in the classroom. So like none of the teachers here, none of the staff here want that. We're not trying to indoctrinate these students in any way. We are trying to support them. And it does not burden me as a teacher to call a student by their preferred pronoun or their preferred name. It provides no burden to me at all, but it means the world to them, and it might make their day just a little bit easier. If I can make their day a little bit easier, then I want to be able to do that. When they face adversity walking through the halls, when they don't feel accepted at home, when they don't feel accepted by their peer group, if I could do that one little thing in my classroom to just give them a little bit of hope, that there's hope at the end of the tunnel. Instead, with this policy, I feel like we're stripping them of hope. We're stripping them of hope. And like I said before, I do agree that they should be able to talk to their parents about this, but in unsafe situations, like one of our students expressed, when they go home and do talk to their parents, they're met with more rejection. So I would just encourage all of you to really think about it and to do what's best for all of our students. As us teachers and the staff here at Arrowhead, like that's what we want to do. I love working at Arrowhead. I always say that I wouldn't want to work anywhere else. But when we inject politics into this school, then as a teacher, it hurts my heart because then it affects how I reach my students. So again, I would implore you to vote no, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else? On behalf of the board, I do want to thank everyone who stepped up to add comment to this evening. In particular, to all the students. It's a very courageous, a very brave, very stressful thing to step onto a podium, speak particularly on this topic. So thank you so much for what you added this evening. We will move on to committee reports. First up is curriculum and Chairperson Hammer.
Our next meeting is September 22nd at 6:45, and I'm meeting with Sue on Friday to discuss our agenda.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Okay, next up is finance and legislation with Chairperson Thompson.
I don't know if my microphone's working, but I will simply say that there's no report at this time. The budget continues to be worked on. And at the time when we need another meeting, we will have another meeting. Jeff, do you have anything to say in addition?
So working on budget development.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Next up is Chairperson Benecker with Buildings and Grounds.
Apologize in because blaming on. For buildings and grounds, we met on August 31st. We had two topics for discussion. The first one was the maintenance facility that's located right across the street from South Campus. Working on to get approval of making some fix that accounted for about $50,000 to make that facility place safe for our employees. I believe we're on course of having that work start. I know getting quotes, having it started later this month. That just looking at each other, that sounds like that. And when do we know when that may be completed?
By this fall.
Okay, so that was on the topic, but the other thing, the huge topic was about the swimming pool. I think we had a great conversation during that meeting. The meeting included the tour of not just seeing what's upstairs where the swimmers swim, but looking down underneath where it is an eye opener and an eyesore. Like I said before, I applaud the maintenance team of the upkeep of that very old swimming pool. But we are,
gathering the quotes to move forward for the electrical downstairs to be fixed in the spring, but we did get the tour from Kevin and reassured that it is they're doing all the measures to make it safe for employees for the pool down there. And then the last part of the meeting, we had some great discussions. Greg Hansen from Lake Country Swim joined our meeting and had some great ideas about potential swimming pool design and fundraising moving forward. And I know in looking at it, they have that there's groups of a lot from Lake Country Swim, social media, Spiro, who was here speaking earlier tonight, of some great ideas to get the pool fundraising going and hopefully replace that pool very soon. So those were the main things. And then also to some other news too, is with, you may have seen on social media, but there is a committee that's getting together to build a baseball batting practice facility. I believe there's 2 phases to that project, which I think the estimated funds is about $500,000. Again, that would be 100% through a donor drive, and they're having that meeting, I believe, at the end of this month. I want to say it's around April 29th. Oh, I'm sorry, September 29th. So we'll have more news on that for the next board meeting. And just with the committee, our next meeting will be Thursday, October 5th, October 6th. And just we'll be getting back on the monthly routine there, where we're going to plan to have the committee meeting the first Thursday of every month. So anyone from the committee, just shoot me an email later on if that doesn't work out, but we'll try and get as many people there for that committee meeting. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next up is Chairperson Wagner with Personnel.
Due to a scheduling error, I was not present at the last personnel committee meeting. And then my road.
Sure, the personnel committee meeting was actually just a closed session, so there's nothing to report on that. And then it went into policy, which we've got policy linked in personnel. Our policy meeting occurred right after that closed session.
We have our next meeting on September 27th with a robust agenda.
Thank you, sir. Next up is policy with Chairperson Harris.
Thank you, Madam President. We had a great meeting on September 7th. First of all, I'd like to once again thank Mr. Beneker, as well as Donna Smith, for working hard to put together a survey quickly for teachers to take. We had an 88% completion rate, which is pretty darn good. And from that, we found out that close to 80% of our teachers are already uploading all of their course materials to Canvas, which was very exciting to hear. So with regards to both of these policies that we're working on, much of what we're requesting as a board for these policies are already happening at our school. So then we moved on to policy 651. We talked about, we worked with Adam. Adam came with a draft from administration with regards to a combination of what the board had originally discussed in conjunction with the practices that the school currently does with regards to transparency with parents and this policy. The questions, there's a lot of discussion about it. The consensus of the board members was to send the policy drafts. We had two drafts, to two different sets of attorneys to get some good eyes on it. So for both of these policies, they went to both sets of attorneys. And then finally, to end the meeting, we discussed the idea of performance expectations for these law firms that we use. One of them is WASB, Bob Butler, who's been great counsel for the school for many years, and the new one, Atollis. And so there are 4 sets of criteria that we had come up with. Ms. Schubert had drafted these performance expectations moving forward for what we're looking for. The next meeting is scheduled to be October 20th at 6:45 a.m. And that was the meeting.
Okay, so we'll move into discussion and action on proposed new policy 334, transparency in curriculum.
Okay, so there's 2, so Kim and I were able to be a part of a meeting, a virtual meeting with Adam and with Laura to discuss these policies with our law teams. There's 2 different recommendations here, attorney recommendation A, attorney recommendation B. I'm assuming as board members that you've had a chance to digest all of these and to look at them and to have any questions or thoughts that we can discuss.
So just a little bit of background information. As both Chris Harris and myself were a part of those conference calls, Laura Myra and Adam Bolt were on as well. I think it would be helpful for not only the board, but for the audience to have a better picture of some of the perhaps more salient points that came out of those conferences. The first one relative to 334 and the transparency in curriculum. When we spoke initially with the Atollis firm, I have a direct quote from the attorney who took the lead in addressing us. And it said she's hesitant to tell the board to move forward with implementation of a pronoun policy. This gets down to the state of uncertainty with the law. Many of you might be aware that there are ongoing some 7 different court cases that kind of center around and about Title IX. The court cases speak to both the student side of Title IX. In addition, I think there are 3 that speak to the parent side of the issue, where parents have lawsuits on their behalf to better have representation in the schools. So frankly, it's about a 50-50 split, to be honest. The impression that I had with regards to the 334 transparency and curriculum from the Atollis review was that in general, their thought process was to rather include the transparency and curriculum into a 300 series procedure rather than to write it as a separate policy. So I'd open it up. Well, I guess that's one. The second review came from Bob Butler, who basically was suggesting that process, in general, process was the sticky point, and make sure that we were highly attentive to process. So with regards to 334, transparency and curriculum, I'd open it up to either Mr. Ferris or Laura and Adam for any additional points on the summary from the conference call.
Is there anything that you'd like to share on what you go through?
Well, I have 2 thoughts from Chrissy Hemmel from the Atollis firm. When she spoke to perhaps putting the language into existing procedures to back up. It was policy 332, which is currently called selection of materials. Administratively, we would recommend to make it more clear to the users, if that's put into the procedure, that we actually change the name of the policy and the procedure itself. So rather than just selection of materials, it would be selection and transparency of instructional materials. So it just brings focus to the fact it's not just about selection, but also our transparency that's in place. In terms of the recommendation from Bob Butler, what stood out for me from that conversation, and as you can see in the drafted policy, there's a lot about copyrighted materials. And we asked questions, or I asked questions related to that, because right now we have students that access materials through Canvas. We have parents of students in the class who can access materials. But my question was, what about parents that are not, they don't have a student in a class, but they would still like to see curricular materials? So for instance, let's say I'm a parent and I have a freshman, but I'd like to see some materials about a lesson in a senior class. Can I still do that? And the attorney's answer to that, and actually both firms said, absolutely, parents have a legal right to see that. What you would do though, is you would request that and come into the school to look at whatever lesson or whatever materials. And that's the typical legal way of doing that, because copyright law, there's a educational fair use law, which means teachers can use it, but we can't just disseminate it to other parents, and who knows where it would go and could be imposing on copyright law. So to me, that was a good point, that it's not just parents within one class, but if parents want to learn about curriculum elsewhere, they can still do that. It's not as convenient as jumping into a Canvas course if their student isn't in it, but they can request and come and access the materials at school, so those copyrighted materials don't walk away with someone who doesn't have copyright permission. Administratively, we feel like there's good practices in place with Canvas. So is there a need for a policy? Perhaps not. If the board makes the decisions about policies. So if you would like a policy, or a standalone policy, or to put that into procedures, we'll make sure that that's implemented.
Anything else you would like to share, Adam?
No.
Okay. So with regards to this policy, I was very, I thought that policy 334, which is policy B, the one that Bob Butler wrote, or revised, I should say, was the one that encapsulated a lot of the concerns with regards to copyrighted information that I thought was put together the best. I do think that as a standalone policy, this makes sense. I think the entire board was encouraged to hear that a majority of teachers, 8 out of 10, are already doing this. So this is something that is a request. The discussion that did happen on the policy committee level did talk about a 1/4 grace period for teachers to get this in.
All right. So for the policy, so are you saying for the lead, because I know there was discussion about basically it would be for the parents, they would be looking at it from the lens of the student. So it wouldn't be a separate documentation, it would be a lens from the student of seeing the things that are the sites, the sources that are referenced. And I was just curious about the one thing, because I know with the teachers, some of it's like, they don't know what the sources that they're going to have next week, because things could be changed. If students are not picking it up quickly, they may add other resources or additional videos, etc. So I know there was a discussion, I thought I saw it in the policy, it's something that's like, after like that unit is done, then the Canvas would be up to date. Is that correct? I was just confused on the 1 quarter late time.
The way that the wording is for either policy, whether it's coming through either attorney A or attorney B, that teachers would be instructed to post during the unit of study.
Okay.
And would have up to a week following the completion of that unit of study.
Okay.
To be able to get the rest of the content posted.
Okay, and then pretty much the sourcing would be not a traditional bibliography, but if it is referencing a website or a PDF file, just showing a simple attachment, say, this is the part of the lesson material.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Hyperlinks, whatever's going to keep us easiest, and frankly, whatever they're probably most used to doing.
Sure.
And to better answer your question, Daryl, the sentence in the policy that addresses that says the instructional materials will be posted during the time of the academic unit or study and will be updated as appropriate, not later than 1 week following completion of this unit or study. So, but then, yeah, there was a little earlier confusion with that. And then with regards to the implementation of the entire policy, that's a grace period that will be discussed in procedure from what I understand.
Right, we've kind of talked around that a little bit with Adam and looking to do what I think is reasonable. Given that we would be pursuing further discussions through committee, with whoever would be appropriate, we would look to continue to review and update at the time frame as necessary. So we're really not looking for an unrealistic implementation timeframe. We're looking to work with the teachers, especially knowing that some of the teachers are going to have a much greater curve for implementation than perhaps others are. So we are looking to implement a grace period and work through that process with Laura and Adam and whomever else we need to ensure that it's done as fast as possible.
Question for administration, would we be able to set up training for the teachers that don't use this or maybe technically challenged to help them get up to speed on this and learn how to use the program?
We actually have offered every single year for the last 7 years, multiple trainings. And they're in-person training sessions. We have a technology integrator position, part-time, well, actually close to full-time, that helps teachers. And we also have all kinds of training online. We regularly all of us receive tips, technology tips, and oftentimes those are about Canvas. We've got so many teachers that are experts after 7 years of implementation that it's actually very rewarding to watch teachers helping each other, train each other. So we are very confident that the professional development and support that's needed is there.
Okay. I guess we would be more than happy to support anything there as well.
A question there was a teacher, and I forget if it was Shannon or Shayna that spoke and had just a comment around that paragraph in there around parents that live outside of the district. I think we should reread that and understand her point. Just reading it, I tend to agree with the comment that she made, that we have to clarify what this is move forward with. I think we should put that on.
Agreed. Yeah.
Yeah, I believe the intention meant to be parents of students in Arrowhead in our coursework, but that isn't explicit, and we want to make it very clear.
Yeah, when I read it the first time, I thought the exact same thing, but she makes it.
Where is that?
It's in the last paragraph right before section. of the one, that I think Bob would provide.
So could we potentially adopt this with the change of when a parent, of an AHS student living outside the geographic area? Just a few words to wrap around that.
You know, Chris, in looking at these, I agree that item B is probably the more comprehensive rule, but it is so dense. And reading that is, I'm not sure whether people are trying to button me down or give me a right. And it is, I think, of necessity that all of those concepts are being shared in a single proposal. But when Laura suggests that maybe procedure is a better place for this than policy, I tend to agree, because this needs to be broken down into chunks. And I think the revision to that sentence is, one item within a sort of organizational rework of this that probably would be best handled within procedure.
Or did you mention something about policy 332, that it could be blended in there?
One of the attorneys recommended, rather than a standalone policy, it could be put into the procedures for policy 332 that's already existing, and that's called selection of materials. My recommendation would be, if you're going to do that, let's change the title to reflect selection of materials and transparency. But it's a very procedural policy written, or as it's written.
Forgive me if I'm confused, but we're talking about details about two different proposed policies. I don't really know which one we're targeting here. So it is confusing to me what we're voting, what we might potentially be voting on.
We're looking at policy, the B version of 334.
Okay, so then are we going to also consider the A version in this discussion?
We certainly are. So is there something you would like to comment on around A?
Well, I just also would mention that we've got two policies here that under consideration, plus the possibility of a procedure in a third policy, and a recommendation by one of the councils that was, in your words, Kim, was hesitant to tell us to proceed on this. I guess and then another legal person, our own WASB person, said we need to be highly attentive to the process and how we do this. So process typically, customarily, prudently at this school has been to, when we have a lot to discuss, which it seems to me we do, given what I just mentioned, this should be sent back to the policy committee to determine, do we want policy A? Do we want policy B? Do we want this to be a procedure added to yet a third policy? And then to consider the reality that both councils suggested to us that we either be hesitant to proceed or we need to be very careful how we proceed. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, I don't believe here at this meeting is the time and the place to come to a vote on this, since there's so much in the area.
So
If I can,
I'd make a motion to table
if
this
I
provision.
can clarify, I just want to speak to, I misspoke earlier. I jumped ahead to 651. And the comments made by, in fact, they were presented to the board by Chrissy Feliz. Her comment was relative to 651, was not relative to 334.
Okay, I misunderstood that, I guess.
No, I think I misspoke. It was unclear, and I apologize for that.
repeat, I make a motion that we table these revisions for further policy committee action.
I second that.
Okay, is there any discussion around the table?
I actually think that we have two policies here that are well put together by our law teams. I think it's just a matter of deciding which one it is. So I don't think we need to do that. I think we can make the decision tonight.
Anything else? I think we'll take a vote on, do we vote on table?
Is there anything, I do have one more comment. Is there anything that we can do to help clarify so we could bring this to vote? What are the outstanding issues that you guys might have issues with right now that we could potentially address to bring this to? Because there have been quite a few policy meetings where we have discussed this in detail.
Well, but there's intervening discussions with council and comments by staff. I just feel like still need to be addressed, and I think in policy we need to decide whether we're talking about moving forward with one or the other, or whether we're moving forward in procedure.
Before we decide to table, could we at least discuss and agree upon what still needs to be clarified in committee?
Brandon, I guess I feel like that's committee work. And so it would seem like what we need to come out of committee with is a single proposal that we can then present to board action, and selecting among the variety that we have in front of us. Job for that committee.
I would agree with Tim on that. Further, one of my problems right now, Brandon, is that I've only laid eyes on this. This has only been available to any of us in the last 24 hours or less. And to make a decision on something that we haven't had a thorough discussion on and an opportunity to reflect upon is premature and not prudent.
I share similar concerns. All I'm saying is I would like to lay out what some of the concerns are so we can go into committee ready to talk about them on the table. That's my only suggestion. I'm not against tabling this because I agree. We haven't had a lot of time to review this. But I would like to understand what some of your potential concerns are. And if you don't want to discuss them now, it's fine.
I guess I don't have specifics for you now, but I do know that in my experience, as we have a robust discussion, and as I personally am a person who needs to reflect on things, the short amount of time that we have to look at these things, plus the further input, would cause me to want to delay this vote.
So I would just say that my biggest concern is I'm a person that appreciates gravity, and so I gravitate to item A, and yet item B contains, some really important items that tell me that we're working out a procedure, not a policy. And I'm uncomfortable with creating a document or a policy that's so dense that a person who might support the idea of transparency might come away from that saying, this looks like an anti-transparency policy. But it talks a lot about how we can't give you information because of the copyright laws. And so I just feel strongly it needs to be reworked. I'm also concerned about getting our implementation schedule right on this. And I don't think that's been adequately addressed here. That's fair.
And so does the other policy offered by the other attorney more meet the needs in terms of brevity, and do the procedural components contained in B meet more of the procedural requirements?
I mean, if I had to pick one, if you're going to say which one goes in the policy category and which one goes in the procedure category, that's exactly what I would say, but I'm not comfortable saying that that's the solution.
So we've got a motion on the table, and a second. Is there any further discussion around that? The motion is to send it back to policy for further work on a transparency and curriculum. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Wait, okay, I'm gonna need the names.
Kim, may I request your hand vote so that we're clear?
Of course. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Back to policy it goes.
Okay, we're moving on to discussion and action for proposed policy 651. There's a few things that I just want to bring. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I mean, so just thinking like the teachers that are there, it's like, okay, I got another month. I mean, I think we kind of agreed on it, you know, Canvas is the tool to update it. So is that kind of the agreement, but we just have to fine tune it? Reapprove policy?
I think any teacher wanting to meet every expectation of the board would know that we want to see their Canvas pages as robust and, you know, revealing as possible.
Okay, no, that sounds good, just because we'll have 4 weeks to do that.
So will we be reviewing attorney A and attorney B recommendations as the policy or one or the other?
We will take it back to policy and review that. Would you suggest? Thank you.
Okay, moving on to policy 651. First of all, I'd like to thank all of you for coming tonight and for sharing your comments. There's a lot of really profound comments, you know, really heartfelt thoughts. You know, there's so many people I've starred in my notes that I would, you know, that I wanted to call out for, you know, some really great thoughts. Rather than doing that, I'm just going to you know, say once again, thank you for your passion. Thank you for your thoughts. We definitely take everything into consideration as a board, and we appreciate it. I want to talk a little bit about the discussion that we had with Bob Butler and with Atolis. Once again, our president, myself, our superintendent, and Adam, we're all in this video conference. Probably the one thing that was the most profound thing that that Bob said is, if you pass this or if you don't, you're still taking action. So as a district, we are, once again, this is a policy based on transparency. It very much is very close in alignment with what the school currently does as a practice. It's a little bit different, but it's very similar. There's two different discussions again with two different attorney recommendations. Before we discuss that and get to that point, I'd like to defer to our president, our superintendent, and Adam to share any thoughts from our conference call.
Well, around 6:51, I can start with Bob Butler since you started this. Again, I would second the comment already made. The quote being, by doing nothing, you are still doing something. Mr. Butler stressed that, in fact, in today's litigious environment, you can put a policy in place and might expect a lawsuit. You can not put a policy in place and you might expect a lawsuit. So at some point, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. And so his point being that, in fact, if you're going to put a policy in place, you need to put a policy in place that you believe supports your constituency as they have spoken. and put it in place and, hope that as some of the legal matters fall, over the course of the next year or two, and there are court decisions coming out of the Seventh Circuit Court and, out of the state and fed, that you land on the right side. Mr. Butler also suggested that he is working with a great number of other school districts. And that the manner in which he fashions his policy is to make it, in fact, as inclusive of a policy as possible. He's working with a bunch of schools here in the state. He's working with the Minneapolis Public School District. And what he's trying to do is include all kids. It's basically irrespective of the transgender population, but it takes into account all kids in their nicknames, kids that have changed their legal names, the transgender community, all kids. And the purpose of the policy, again, is a reflection back to the parents and their consent given on a consent form at the beginning of the year for both proper names, nicknames, and pronouns. So that was kind of a discussion from Bob Butler. From Atolis, as I mentioned earlier, it should have been relative to 651. Their concern was that there haven't been decisions on court cases. And I think they, in general, took a more risk-averse perspective in trying to advise us. And so we ended up with their version of the policy with relatively few changes to the verbiage. Those were primary take-homes from me.
And one other thought I just wanted to share about from the Tolis law firm is they mentioned that this policy is not a prohibitive policy. It's an inclusive policy. I did hear that from one parent tonight as well. It's really all about including families and parents in this discussion. So that did give them a perspective that was less concerned. Okay, Superintendent Meyer.
My read on the two meetings with the attorneys were this. I felt as though Bob Butler was taking our policy that was drafted and with the idea of the board is going to adopt a policy on this. That's a given. And so he tried to make it as legal as possible. And I think he said as trying to make us as secure as possible against any potential discrimination claims. And so he made it about, as you're saying, about all students, legal name change, and so forth. So it's a very lengthy policy to try and encapsulate all. So I felt like he was taking the board's drafted policy, assuming it would be adopted and putting it in place. My read on Chrissy Hemmel and Jay Curtis from Atolis, I felt like they were looking at giving us overall recommendation first, which Chrissy had said, given that there's still court cases in place. Actually, let me back up. First, she asked, as the call was starting, I don't think you were on yet, Chris. She asked Adam and I, what do we already do? Do we have procedures in place? We explained, yes, we do. Here's what we do. Here's, we're not keeping secrets from parents. And so she said, good, you have procedures in place. And then her comment was, given the uncertainty of the law and not knowing for sure where those court cases would land, that she recommended we not put a policy in place until the time that those lawsuits are not, till the lawsuits are determined and we have results from those cases to guide us. I think it was in that call, or maybe it was the webinar that Atolis did at 8 o'clock that some of us, our administrative team participated, and I think Kim, you were in that. One of those two meetings, the quote was, having a policy could result in them holding it up, and this is now exhibit A in a lawsuit. And she said, but if you want to have a policy, then here's the recommended language, which was, as you said, very much what was already adopted. So that was my read on those meetings, the verbal recommendations that weren't necessarily captured in the policy drafts.
Any thoughts?
Yeah,
Adam?
I know that there'll be five or six maybe board members at the policy meeting. Has everybody had a chance to either view the meeting or view the slides from Ron that I forwarded from our training last December and go through those? So I think just as like there's a lot of people, and I spent a lot of time on this. So let's I want to set the stage for people that haven't had time to view the policy meeting from last week. So I've been here for 12 years, and part of that time as a school psychologist, the rest of that time as director of student services. And since that time, we have treated transgender issues, transgender students, topics relatively the same way up until about December and the time that Ron talked to us last year. And that manner was the student would come in and request something, and we would honor that request, and they would kind of go about their day, whether that was bathroom usage, name usage, what have you. That process seemed to work well. About once a year, the board would ask, how many transgender students do we have at Arrowhead? And I would say, I don't know. But I know we have transgender students at Arrowhead, and our counseling and psychologist team work with those students in terms of what's the appropriate facility use, name use they want to go with. Last December, Ron Statler came in, did his presentation for the board, and talked about the gray areas with the current lawsuits that we now have in the state of Wisconsin and others in the Seventh Circuit Court around, does the parent have a right to know the name their child is being called at school, or the name their child is using at school? Based on what he talked about in the gray areas of the law, myself and our student services staff pulled back together and with the rest of the administration's approval. And we talked about moving forward how, because of where the law is at, that we would not act on behalf of a student wanting to change their name unless their parents were involved in that situation. What that meant in practice was a student might go to their teacher and say, I'm Adam, I would like to be called Allison. And the teacher would comply and go about their day. Teachers also did icebreaker exercises that just said, what name, what's your name? What do you prefer to be called? Sometimes it would include pronouns in that icebreaker, and the kids could just write it down on that piece of paper. The teacher would comply and move forward. But if a student came to us and said, I would like to be called Allison, will you email my teachers if that is what I'm to be called? We would say, is your parent aware? They said, yes. Okay, we're just going to call, have the conversation with them. If they say no, we say, we can't advocate on your behalf for this change to be made because we need to have your parents sign off on that. And that change was made after Ron Statler went into all the gray areas of the law right now. He had a lot of slides on the topic, and at that point, we were talking about facilities. There's a couple of salient slides within there where it talks about when you get into Title IX, Discrimination Act, and how it starts to equate sex and gender together. And really just for everyone's sake here, to give you an idea, and you're gonna get a lot of these examples moving forward of where the law just isn't firm yet. Slide 29 of this presentation said that it requires a school to treat transgender. Title IX requires schools to treat transgender students consistent with their gender identity. Title IX. There was a case, Kludge versus Brownsbury County School District, that what was up for litigation was if the school district allowed a teacher to not call the student by their chosen name. So again, if I'm Adam and I want to go by Allison, and Jeff is my teacher, and he says, no, that I will not call that teacher, or I will not call him that. It's against a belief of mine, like a religious belief, something that might be protected under the Constitution or First Amendment. What's the implication there? And what was up for litigation, but then I believe backed off of, because I believe the suit was dropped because there was a mutual agreement between the school, the teacher, and the student, was that it was subject to a Title IX discrimination lawsuit because the school was allowing the teacher not to call the student by their chosen pronoun. In our conversation with Atolis, they talked about this very issue. If we say to a teacher who prefers to not call the student by their chosen name, that's okay, they don't have to call them by their chosen name, that's a potential Title IX discrimination lawsuit. If we say to the teacher, we prohibit you from using the name that you would like to call, you have to call the student by their chosen name, that could be a potential freedom of religion, freedom of speech issue. Where you have two competing things going on at the same time. That was not litigated because that case was dropped. As Ron talked to us about in the December meeting, a lot of times the higher courts are waiting for the right case to come forward. And that is what we're seeing with the does a parent have a right to know what their child is being called at school? Ron's last slide, salient for this, was in regards to to having a policy, yes or no. He said pros to having a policy would be uniformity and consistency. Cons would be hard to address in every possible scenario, and it has a tendency to become a political issue. The hard to address every possible scenario is a little bit of what we get into in practice. Had a meeting with our sites and counselors today, just reviewing the proposed policy, and we talked a little bit more about how that would look in practice. In talking over with Atolis, we were also part of a webinar with them prior to talking with them, where they discussed a number of issues. All right. So if a parent asks us as a staff what name or pronoun the student is using in school, Amy's now my mom, and she says to my guidance counselor, who is her husband, I'm guessing. I'm sorry, this is I didn't mean this to be funny, but it's working out that way. My guidance counselor, Mr. Carraggio, I'm hoping that they have information. If she says to my guidance counselor, what name is Adam using at school? We cannot keep that information from my mother. So now Mr. Carraggio is compelled to tell my parent what name and pronoun I'm using, unless there's a suspected abuse case at home. Both law firms said be very sure on that. You want to be very sure on that if you're going to take that route. So if a parent asks what name their child is using at home, we cannot keep that information from the parent unless there's suspected abuse. Both law firms, both Atoli's and Bob Butler were pretty firm on that piece.
Can I break in for just a second?
Yep.
Actually, Bob Butler did mention that if there is suspected abuse, that you and everyone in the school is a mandatory reporter.
If they're
That has
suspected,
to
yeah,
happen.
so if we have notification, if a student comes to me and says, I've been abused by my parent, we have to report that. That's an easy practice to comply with. What I believe they were talking about, because again, that's a easy thing that we all get trained on every year to comply with, would be if we suspect that there might be abuse because of notifying the parents. So there may not be a history of abuse. There might be things that I've told my guidance counselor that might lead them to think that my parent might not be supportive of my gender identity, that keeping that information, because you haven't been reported abuse, but you have a feeling that that could lead to a harmful situation. That's the very rare instance where they said, like, be careful about it. So maybe it was just a total saying, like, be careful in that situation if you're gonna make that jump in logic. All right. With Atoli's suggestion, and as Laura said, they suggested to not have a policy in place for a few reasons. The biggest reason was the fact that the law is not firm on this. They felt that once you write it down in policy, you're opening yourself up to a lawsuit. You have greater exposure to a lawsuit if you just have a practice. And if you have a practice and you stick to that practice, you're less likely to bring yourself into a lawsuit and then lose that lawsuit as the courts are leaning right now. The Ash Whitaker case from Kenosha stated that we cannot single out a student based on gender. What was talked about as well when we brought forward the policy that administration had drafted that said if we're going to go forward with a policy, this is probably what it would have to look like to not run afoul of Title IX discrimination. And a lot of that was based on the work that Ron Statler had done. We brought that forward. I thought that in the eyes of the law and discrimination, that would be a pretty clean, you're doing this for everyone policy. Somebody mentioned it tonight, and Atoli's brought it up, that if we have a policy that appears to be neutral, we might still be in trouble because keeping somebody from complying with a simple request, it still targets transgender students because they're more likely to be targeted if we have a policy about name changes. The example was if we allow Christine to go by Chrissy, either an easy mistake can be made, or we're allowing a name change that's consistent with the biological sex of the child. However, if Christine wants to go by Patrick, it's much more likely to be enforced that we make that child comply with the policy. And that was seen as possibly targeting a student based on gender. Bob's take on it. So are we clear on which one's Chrissy and which one's Bob's? Did we talk about that?
Obviously.
Bob, yeah. So Bob, okay. So Bob's the lengthier policy. Bob's take on it was, in order to make it equal for all students, when you would come up against a discrimination case, if you have a broad-based policy where now we're including requests supported by a court-ordered name change, so that has nothing, it has something to do with the name change, but there's not a transgender issue specific there. It's like if somebody changes their name with a court order, change their name in your system. Item B, if it's not supported by a court order, here's how you can change the legal name in the system. So Skyward can operate on two different systems. We can have the legal name in one, what are you legally called in all your documentation, and then what is it that you go by? B is looking at a second way of changing a legal name through our system. E is where we get into then the heart of pronoun usage, changing a name. And as Laura said, he kept a lot of the verbiage that the original draft had presented, just around the how do you go about executing a name change, including the pieces which Laura alluded to. I totally said would be Exhibit A if we had a case brought against us where we're looking at that it's okay to shorten a name, but then you would have to change the name if it was a name change. Bob seemed to think that that would have merit or have standing, because you're still, if I'm Adam and I want to go by Andy instead, I still go through that same process that Adam going to Allison goes through. However, with that, Ron and Atoli seem to think that that would be put us up for a discrimination suit. I think it's important to note that when we talked with Bob about some of the different legal counsel that we had received on this, and the way that Atoli's and Ron Statler had talked about the way the courts are leaning. So we don't have a case that's been litigated on this yet. We have cases that are sitting out there in the Seventh Circuit Court, which presides over us, that are waiting to be litigated, and that will give us our kind of final guidance on how we should operate. What he said was, you could very well go through a discrimination case that you lose, appeal that case, lose that case, possibly appeal that case, lose that case, get up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court could end up ruling in your favor. So essentially that if you went through with his policy, we could lose a few times, but then could potentially win at the Supreme Court level. There's I think questions for the board to consider around that just given the prevailing nature of the way that the courts are ruling on this, they seem to be going towards the fact that a student could be called something in school without their parent knowing. But what Bob was saying with that is that if you get all the way up to the highest court in the nation, they could rule in favor of supporting a policy and practice like this. That it's a lot to consider. There's even more laws that I have gone through to look at whether or not we run afoul of those, but I think those are the salient ones here. So I think considering as a board all the possible legal pieces that I just quite frankly have not been firmed up yet, what we want to do going forward. It was the recommendation I made at the policy meeting that I thought we should walk away from the policy, because with what Atoli said, once we put it down, it makes us, I believe, to have more legal exposure to a lawsuit, and that we could keep our practices the same and even make sure that we're firming up those practices so that we're consistent in our practices at the school. Lastly, Kevin Lewandowski spoke earlier, and the way that we operate is hire Kevin. Kevin works directly with students and directly with students that are, most affected by tough times that they're going through at school. Kevin tells me about it because I'm not there working with them directly like Kevin is. And I tend to trust Kevin's thoughts and opinions because that's what he's there to do. So if we're looking at this from the student perspective and the way this might affect students, I put my faith in Kevin to give us the accurate information from the ground floor. So that's all of it. Thank you for indulging me in all the history lessons I've learned on litigation around this topic.
Thank you.
there any further discussion from the board with regards to this? There's a few things that I think are noteworthy that Adam brought up. One of them is the fact that the school actually changed their policy to start including parents after we talked. Practice, not policy. To include parental inclusion because of a lawyer that we listened to in fall. That's very is very knowledgeable of things that are happening in the courts. Once again, I just want to mention Bob's probably most profound thing he said: if you pass this or if you don't, you're still taking action.
Follow-up question for Adam. So right now parents are being informed.
It depends. So if a child goes to a teacher and says, Mr. Miller, will you call me Allison? They sure. They call you Allison. If a child comes to me as a guidance counselor or a school psychologist or anyone in the school and says, I would like to be called Allison, will you please notify all my teachers that I'm to be called Allison? We say we need your parents on board before we act on your behalf to communicate out widely to the rest of the staff or make any changes officially within our system.
So is it safe to assume that parents are only informed when they come to administration for approval?
When they ask the school to act on behalf of them.
Or if parents ask.
And what's the justification for the that's sort of the totally separate approaches?
The law is in an incredibly gray area, and after hearing what Ron had said about potential cases that were out there, we felt that we were in legally a good position if we weren't acting on behalf of the student to make those broad sweeping changes, but that we were also protecting the student rights to being called what they want to be called in the school. Because there's also been harassment cases where if a student is referred to by a name that they don't choose, like the one that we talked about that Ron brought up in slide 33 of his presentation, then we would be protected from that. So we're trying to work both sides of the fence here and trying to stay out of court, I guess.
I have another
Where the
question.
practice comes into play.
Can I answer your question? Okay. I do have one other question, and it's more of a procedural question. What happens during parent-teacher conferences, for example?
Yeah.
So if there's a discrepancy between a name or pronoun, how is that handled?
So one of the things we work with students on that don't that are going by a different name with their friends or with their teachers, and they don't want their parents to know, is like, this is going to probably come out sooner rather than later, whether you want it to or not. If you're going around by this different name and different pronouns, you've asked your teachers to call you this at parent-teacher conferences. They're likely to refer to you by this name and cannot hide it if you're going by this name. So that's where that conversation comes in, to be like, you should talk to your parents or stop going by this name because it's going to come out. Bob touched on student right to privacy as well. For a student, and what he said in that regard was, as soon as a student is going by a different name with their friends, that in his eyes the right to privacy has been crossed because they're kind of out in public doing this act. And so that's where that interplays with, you cannot keep that information from a parent. If a parent asks you, like, what are you calling my student in class, you can't keep that information from a parent. Yes.
So when I go into Skyward, I look at my kid's profile. So say they go through that, say, hey, I want to be changed from identifying as a boy to a girl. Is that changed right in Skyward? Or is or is there
Well,
cost?
one of the things that's not on here
With the parent.
is do we change the gender notification in Skyward, yes or no? I'm not sure the state's at that point yet where we're changing the piece, but if I went from Adam to Allison, then my parents could sign off and say, change everything in Skyward to represent him as or represent her as Allison, it would be at that point, in Skyward, or just that's what Adam's gonna go by from now on, is that he's gonna go by Allison. So what we'd look at in practice would be different levels of, how much change do you want to see? Obviously, changing it in Skyward is the easiest route to go through, because then that's just what everybody sees. There's no mistakes being made on what a child wants.
And my assumption is that would be written as a procedure.
Yeah, we would have to nail that down in future meetings.
Let me ask another question. In that situation, by our current practice, if a student goes themselves or herself to every teacher and even the school psychologist on their own and request that I am no longer Adam, I'm Allison. Since the student didn't ask the school to do it on their behalf, but effectively did the same thing by doing it individually one-on-one, what happens then?
Then the teachers are complying with whatever the request is made.
And what came up on that was if you treat students differently from any other student, that's when you open yourself up to a discrimination claim. So for instance, if I'm Samantha and I go to my teacher and say, I want to be Sam. Yes, our policy as drafted says that's a shortened name from the birth name. So that would be okay. We would be discriminating if we said Samantha can change to Sam if you still are presenting yourself as a female. But if you're Samantha and you're going to go by Sam, we better call your parent because now you're presenting as a male, that's discriminatory. And if that's the case, then if Samantha wants to go by Patrick and we don't allow it, like we would allow Robert to go by Bob, then that could be discriminatory. It would be discriminatory or open us up for a discrimination claim. So that was the point about if a student says, call me this. If Tim, if you said, call me Timmy, I prefer Timmy, sure. If Lynn says, call me Lawrence, and we say, no. That's the problem.
Well, and that's why Bob Butler added that information in the nickname section in section E. I think once again, policy B is very complete and hits on all possible considerations with regards to that.
I want to ask one more question on that scenario I just threw out, where the student on their own went to every teacher and admin and never asked the administration on their behalf. So in that case, parents weren't notified, didn't have to be notified in that situation. Do we have, or could we have, based off of current practice, situations where the school counselor and psychologist can support the student in their transition phase with the parent not being aware?
What do you mean to support them in their transition phase?
Support from offering counseling advice, offering whatever counselors do, and understanding that there are questions. They're going through many things, so it's going to open up into, I don't know what the questions could be, but is the counselor allowed to provide that support of that transition without a parent knowing?
Kevin, do you want to speak there or you want me to take it? So in a typical situation, what school counselors and school psychologists do is support students with how they're thinking and feeling while they're at school. So what a typical thing that we'll take on is a student is not able to concentrate on learning for a variety of reasons. Anxiety, depression, ADHD, just not feeling comfortable at school, safety concerns, bullying, harassment, going through tough times at home, and if that includes transitioning, then that's something that they're going to discuss. Typically, how they're going to discuss that is how can you work with the way that you're thinking and feeling right now so that you don't feel as bad right now and that you can get on with your normal life. So all kinds of counseling or therapy, which we don't really provide therapy. I think the closest we get is working with students on some anxiety and depression techniques to manage symptoms while at school. But the focus of the school psychologist or the focus of the counselor is going to be directed at, this is the way you feel while you're at school. How can we help you feel better at school? One of those things is my parents don't accept the way that I am or that the way I feel. The school psychologist or counselor will work with the student and it's like, how can we make that situation better for you? Because a lot of times, as we've talked about, like hiding from the issue, and I think some of our students have spoken to this, talking about the issue or talking about it with their family ends up helping, but being able to do it on their timeline is something that helps a lot. We wouldn't want to push that timeline forward on students to make it for when they're not ready to have that conversation.
Okay, one more follow-up. Like when you talked about timeline, which I understand, do our counselors help students with that timeline without parents involved?
What do you, like for when they're gonna have that conversation with their parents?
With a conversation with their parents, with the conversation of maybe other steps in the transitional phase? Are there things?
Is your question whether or not our counselors or school psychs help them continue to transition from male to female?
Yeah.
No. They're not gonna help them transition from male to female and say, here are the steps that you take to transition from male to female. They're gonna work more with the way that they feel right now in the moment while they're at school, while they're at Arrowhead, specifically around how does the way they think and feel affect their ability to do schoolwork. Case in point, I didn't know that the student was one of our transgender students. One of the students that spoke tonight, I found in the corner of the school at North Campus. Another person said, hey, the student's just here. They don't seem like they're having a great day. You want to check in on them? I went and checked in on them. You know, you're kind of out here, not in class, not in a great spot. They told me they're not having a good day. I said, hey, I got a spot for you where staff is not gonna, every staff member of the world isn't gonna come up to you and say, how are you doing? How are you doing? How are you doing? Would you like to come to that spot where you can just kind of collect yourself? That student said, sure. And we walked and I found them a spot where they could collect themselves by themselves within eye shot of me, where I could make sure that they were all right. I checked on them after that time and I said, what class do you have next? And they told me what class you have next. I said, let's see if we can go to that class just for a little while. I'm gonna let your counselor and school psychologist know that you're having a rough day and maybe to check in on you. And that was the way that I supported a transgender student through a transgender issue. They're having a tough time at school. Hey, how can we get you back on track? How can we get you to a space where you need to be? Now, a counselor or school psychologist that has a relationship where they're seeing that student more often might talk more about greater things that they're going through in their life, and maybe it's the transition with the home life. Maybe the parents on board and it's the transition with the peers or how the peers are treating them, or just any host of issues that go on. So again, helping them. The purpose of the school counselor, school psychologist is to help students engage in school work and school life. They have a hard time doing that if their mental wellness is affected, and so their role is to get that mental health symptoms or wellness or well-being back on track so that they can engage back in the school environment. That can tackle a long range of issues, but do our counselors and psychologists help a student transition from a male to a female, female to male, or what have you? No, they don't assist in that process.
And in this process then, Adam, the school psychologist offering perhaps repeated interventions and discussions with the student. Is the parent aware of that at that time?
They might be aware that they're seeing the school psychologist for a reason, because they're not feeling well, they're having anxiety, they're having depression, but the details of those sessions typically are not shared with parents. So it's the same way if when I was a school psychologist, if I was meeting with a student, actually I have a case. I was meeting with a student who was in the process of coming out as gay to his parents. The parents knew that the student wanted to see me. The parents knew that the student wanted to continue seeing me while I had summer hours here throughout the summer. The student and I worked from about April, one of the years that they were in high school, till October, when that student finally came out to his family. The parents knew that I was working with that student the whole time. I don't know to this day, because the parents never asked me, like, hey, what are you guys talking about? I know that the student likes to, my child likes to come and see you. What are you talking about? They never asked those questions. They just said, thanks for seeing them throughout the summer. And then in October, came out to his parents, and as far as I know, everything was great. I see him every now and again at Arrowhead functions, but again, when you talk about the timeline, you talk about April to October, 5-6 months for that to occur, but sometimes that's as long as it takes. And I have a feeling his parents are ready for him to come out ahead of that schedule, but that's what he needed to become comfortable with the change, or even be sure sometimes of that. This is where I'm going with, like, the initial conversations are just like, I'm having these thoughts and feelings and I don't know what to make of them, right? And so in the realm of psychology or counseling, you just more or less ask the student or patient questions and try to help them figure it out for themselves, instead of you don't guide them to answers, because if you guide them to answers, it doesn't work well at all. They have to come out with the answers themselves. You need to ask them guiding questions that are going to help them figure out what it is they're working through at any given time.
So then in the same student, if there had been earlier notification of the parent that that same student had been requesting name or pronoun changes in the school, and if the parents were notified, they would have in fact been brought into the process quite a bit earlier, potentially.
So yeah, so what you're talking about is if the student would have been asking me, I want to go by, I'm transitioning and I want to go by a different name, will you ask my teachers to call me this name, or will you change this information? Skyward, I have to say, like, we need to talk to your parents about this, because we can't do that without your parents' permission. Are your parents on board? That particular student, again, it's a little bit of a different issue. He was coming out as gay to his family and not transgender, but from what I remember from those times, that student would have likely said, no, let's not do that. I'm not ready. And then we probably would have continued to have more of those conversations. Under this policy, what I believe can still happen is, had I had that conversation with that same student and they said, I want to change my name from Tim to Tiffany, I was said, we need to get your parents' permission to make this change. They would have said no, and I said, okay, if you want to make that change, though, we got to work on you talking to your parents about it, and we're probably still having a similar conversation. again, the nuance in this is the current practice being that students can request for their teachers to call them right now by literally any name they choose,
Yes.
as long as it's appropriate. Where the school comes in is when the student asks the school to act on their behalf to notify teachers or change information within the system. Then we need to bring the parents on board with that. And again, as Laura last stated, the issue of discrimination is the one that we're trying to avoid, because again, if I walked in and said, I'm Adam, put Andy in the system, tell all my teachers to call me by Andy, we would say, we're not going to do that for you. You can ask your teachers to call you Andy, but if you want us to change information in your system or act on your behalf, we need your parents' permission. So again, we're trying to be consistent in our practices and trying to avoid stepping over a discrimination suit. Now, does that practice of, if we're going to act on your behalf, we need parent permission, from what one of our citizens commented on and what Atoli said is, like, we still have to be careful with that practice, because it could still be discriminatory, because it's going to be more discriminatory against a transgender student who's changing a name that's more commonly affiliated with the opposite sex than one who's changing their name to a name that's more commonly associated with the same sex. But I believe from when we told the law, or Toli's asked that question, when we told the Toli's what our practice was, they didn't seem to have a suggestion for changing our practice. Right?
Right.
They were happy we had one. We
Something
told them it,
consistent.
and being consistent was the key to that.
Yeah, I guess I find it interesting that our school's practice is very similar to what we're proposing. The only thing that's different is, I think it all comes down to, the bottom line here is, do the parents of minor students have the right to know? That's what it comes down to. Do the parents of minor students have the right to know? I find it interesting that as a dad, that I'm alerted to my kids' grades. I'm alerted if they're marked absent. I'm alerted if they're going on a field trip. I have to sign up on all that stuff. That's pretty minor stuff. If there's something big, as you heard my daughter talk tonight, I want to know about it. And parents have the right to know. That's all we're asking. And it's kind of what we're already doing. It's very similar. So we're not at all trying to, I wanted to just make a couple of quick points on other things. I don't know if Ray Whelan's still here. Is she still here? If she's not, there are a lot of students that are still here. We have an amazing group of administrators in this school. We have two amazing associate principals. Becky Gordon's here tonight. If things are happening, you gotta tell us. Okay. Thanks. Okay. Oh, Deb, hey. Yeah. Hello. They're both here. I didn't see you there. We have amazing associate principals at this school, and they will take action, and they have your back. And it's not okay. The bullying BS has to stop here. And I know that they take it very seriously. I know firsthand they take it seriously. So I implore all of you students, if you hear something or if you see something, please say something to them. They got your back, But as parents, all we're asking is that we want to know. It's not too much to ask, and it's very similar. It's a shade off of what we're doing already as a school.
I can't help but wonder, in an effort to be risk averse around Title IX, that on the back end, we don't sacrifice the knowledge of our parents. There are clearly different circumstances where your kids know the system. They know they can individually approach teachers. They're not coming to administration. They're falling into a certain crack. And so that's going on, and our parents are not, they're not knowing. they're not being notified.
Talk to your kid. What's your job as a parent? Talk to your kid.
I think sometimes kids come to school quite clearly, and they're doing things here that the parents have no knowledge of.
Maybe there's a reason for that.
There might well be, but nonetheless, is it not the parents' right to know?
Oh,
And
it's different things.
Is there any other discussion from the board that would like to have?
So as I read these two policies, neither of them compel anybody to report out a child who said that they would like to be called by a different name. What it says is that parents have to consent before the school becomes complicit in that process. Is that correct?
that's correct. It's a consent issue.
So there's not, so nobody's calling for administration to say, oh, they said something in a counseling session. Now I have to call the parents, saying that before the school starts being complicit in the process, they need a parent's consent.
Correct.
Yes.
Any other thoughts from the board? So having said that, I would like to make a motion to pass Attorney B recommendation on the proposed 651 student name and pronoun authorization policy.
We have a motion before the board and a second. Is there any further discussion?
I reluctantly have to say again that I have not had the time personally to adjust or rather digest all this information. Maybe I'm just a little bit slow, but I would like to have more time to consider this. And without that time, I have a hard time voting in favor of this. That along with the fact that we have a very solid practice in place, and we were advised by at least one of these legal firms that it's not a good idea to go ahead with this. I am a parent of 4. All 4 have gone through the school. They have had an excellent education with excellent caring teachers and other staff. I want to know what's going on with my kids. Certainly I do. I've always wanted to know what's going on with my kids. But sometimes in a season in life, it's tough to communicate, especially with adolescents. In any case, I have a need to consider this further, and I am not in a position that I'm ready to vote for or against it. And if I can't, then I have to say, no, I can't do it yet.
One comment from me, and I think the community, students, parents, kind of on both sides of the issue, asked the board to really deeply consider this on a personal level as well as keeping politics out of it. And so I think, again, as we look at parents of minors having the voice in these decisions or being in the conversation in these decisions is not political in nature, in my opinion, as I think through. And I have quite a few examples since we've started talking about this a few months ago in the very first policy meetings with some Randy talk. We're not hearing about it for the first time tonight. But I've reflected, I've had close friends whose children have transitioned and gone through the process with them not knowing, and they find out on graduation day. And there are parents that I know, and I know the kids, know the family very well. We vacation together, and it's not as though it wasn't the communication problem between the students, the child, and the parents. It was something that they kept very very secluded from the parents. And went on, and almost led a dual life for several years. And then they finally found out. Happy to say the family's in a good spot with it now, very accepting. But the school knew about it for 3 years and did never inform the parents. Another example that is a little bit closer to home because it's a relative who was struggling through multiple issues, not just this topic, but many others, ended up taking his own life. This is, I'm going to leave it out because we can connect to who the family is, but it's a family member. And again, there were a lot of sessions as this all came out after the suicide. There were many sessions with the school and the school counselor. This is not from Arrowhead. And the school counselor, and none of it was ever brought forward to the parents. And so a lot of things through that, I think, slipped through the cracks. But again, I know the family, their families, they are my family. So I know them. And it was a surprise because again, the student was living almost a dual life. A life at home and then a life at school, and kept it secret on purpose. And again, very loving family. But the worst thing happened. Suicide happened. Parents were never aware of it one iota. Could they have changed it? Maybe, maybe not, but they could have had a chance. They were never afforded the chance because it was kept secret. And again, in this case, school knew about it for over 2 years and acted in the behalf of the student without the parents' acknowledgement whatsoever. So I have taken it very personal. I have reflected on it morning, noon, and night. I lose sleep about it. And I've talked to many parents. I've talked to many grandparents around the community. I've talked to my friend that I mentioned earlier with the family friend. I talked to the direct family member who lost their child and got their perspective as well. I talked to other friends and coworkers who I know have students and family members that have transitioned or identify differently than they were at birth, and kind of just got guidance from them on, all right, if the same situation. I just talked about the policy proposal. And I'm not going to say all the time, but majority of the time, I got the feedback of, yes, either I was a part of the process and I'm glad I was, or I wanted to be a part of the process, but I was left out until I noticed the trigger point and then started asking a bunch of questions and then got caught up in a matter of hours in a long session of just venting and dialoguing with their child. But again, secrets kept for a long time. So I have taken it very personally, reflected on it, and I think with how I talk to people, I am representing what I feel is best for everyone, and I'm ready to offer a vote.
How do you feel?
Pardon?
How do you feel about it?
I feel that a policy like this is the right thing because it protects the student and it protects the parent. It's both. We look at it one-sided so many times that this is a vindication against the student, and I don't feel that way. And through my experiences and conversations in practice, given time, I don't think it will feel that way. It may feel like that today because something is perceived to be taken away, but in practice, it will not, because it engages the very first fundamental support system for the student, and that is the parent.
Very well said, thanks, Sam.
I think I can speak literally for everybody on the board on this. There have been a lot of conversations, obviously. There is not a board member out here who hasn't taken this deep into their soul and done extensive soul searching around this. All of us have children. All of us have nieces and nephews, friends who have children. And at the end of the day, after the lost sleep, after the heart-wrenching personal path that you take this through, I think there is something that is just innate in the desire for parents to want to be involved. This is not political. There's nothing political about this. There is a desire for parents to want to be involved. And I think Tim said it most eloquently. Any further discussion?
I share Tim's view on this, that it is deeply personal. I do not care to get into it myself either, but I have some similarities with your story, Tim. So it is personal for me as well. I've struggled about this in my own family. That being said, I get to a more practical point and say simply that we have an imperfect but a good practice here. And to open up ourselves, I believe, to almost saying, here we are, you can pick on us for a lawsuit. I don't see why we would want to do that. I don't fault anybody for their vote. I don't fault anybody for their opinion as a community member. There are different ways of looking at this, and this is not easy. I hope we can all understand each other and accept one another.
Anything further? Anybody, we will take this to a roll call vote. So we have a motion and a second around the adoption of policy 651 as written by Attorney B. I will start with the alphabet. Member Benneker, what is your vote?
Yeah, this is very difficult. Be in favor of this.
Member Edwards, what is your vote?
In favor.
Member Hemmer, what is your vote?
In favor.
Member Langer, what is your vote?
I'm in favor.
Member Miller, what is your vote?
Favor.
You work on the complaint.
My vote is a yes. Member Thompson, what is your vote?
No.
Member Vogelman, what is your vote?
Yes.
I think we've captured all of the votes. Oh, I'm so sorry. Member Barrett?
Yes.
I'm so sorry. The motion carries. Thank you all very much for your give consideration.
How much you care about the students.
The next meeting,
Not at all. Not at all.
the next meeting date is October 20th, 2022, 6:45 a.m.
Shame on you. Shame on you.
Moving on to other reports. I have nothing to report on WASB. Member Evers, do you have anything to report on Susan?
No, not this one.
New business, employee transactions, resignations, retirements. Do I have a motion to approve the resignations? Any discussion around this? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Contracts, letters of appointment. Second,
I'll second.
discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Discussion and action to accept donations. Is there a second? Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Future agenda items. Does the board offer anything at this time for future agenda?
Yeah, actually, so obviously bullying was brought up a few times tonight. That'd be something that is discussed in a select committee. May not necessarily be ready for a board meeting, but I don't know which committee that would fall under, but perhaps we'll start talking about that as well.
We have, if I could interject, we have a bully policy. That's required by state law. And gosh, probably 6 months.
December.
Oh, December.
Yeah.
So last December, we did a presentation. Our school administrative team, so our principal, our associate principals gave about a 45-minute presentation about how we handle bullying reactively, but perhaps even more importantly, how we handle school climate and culture proactively. And at that time, there was a lot of people in the audience and board members that were very impressed, and we're really thankful to have heard all of that, and recognizing that we have new board members and still community interest in that topic. We might want to do that presentation again, and that could certainly be in policy committee, or it could be here where we tend to have more public participation.
And different, I mean, any other thoughts on the topic?
Policy will meet prior to next board meeting, correct?
Yeah, we will, but I like the idea of having a special meeting here.
Right.
And then making a big deal about it with the students, maybe, administration can really push this for students to come and talk and come and listen. And we can start talking about, just being more transparent from and I know that it's hard sometimes as a student to share, this is happening or that's happening, but gosh, how do you do anything if you don't know? It's kind of like what we're talking about.
I guess I'm looking at the topics still coming up. So if the topic's still coming up, is there other things that could be looking at or something that way?
I think after you see the presentation, you'll have more information, and I think some of what was surprising to some community members and board members was where we have some legal guidance where we don't have, if bullying is happening off campus, off hours, non-school event, we don't have legal authority to do anything about it unless it significantly impacts the learning environment. So in many cases, our hands are tied. our associate principals still try to help and inform and work with students, but we can't discipline, we can't act as a parent in disciplining when it's something over a weekend, for instance, which is frustrating, but I think some families don't understand that. This kid's bullying my child. Well, through student survey, we've learned that 70% of bullying that happens off-site, offline.
The interesting thing,
So some of that information is good for community members, students, and parents to hear.
Sure. The interesting thing that I heard from Ray tonight was that even today, there were, slurs that were happening in the halls. And I get it, but I mean, these kids just have to talk about it. They have to bring it up. They have to be able to say something. That's all. What's happening here?
Right. Lots of ways to do that.
We can look to the October, meeting, I think,
Sure.
at this point.
And I would suggest that could be the superintendent report. So it's early in the meeting when there tends to be a lot of people here. And then it's public comment comes after that. So after there's some learning and I guess just learning and explaining what we already do, then public comment could raise questions or even further ideas for us to consider.
Yeah, there's just so many more ways to be bullied today than when any of us went to school. Probably only 2 days back when we went to school.
Right.
Now there's so many different opportunities to bully, and then it can linger in. So the bullying, cyberbullying over the weekend, but then that manifests itself, even though it may not occur directly, it can happen in the lunchroom just by how people are avoided.
And guess what? Every 4 years, our student body flips over.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not trying to be flippant, but let's say freshman or sophomore year, we whip these kids in shape. There might not be as much bullying as junior and senior year, but there's a whole new crop of freshmen and sophomores coming in. So when someone had said, you haven't solved this problem, we never will. No school ever will, because you continue to turn students over and you continue to work, and sadly, there's no silver bullet here.
Right. And I saw like at a football game where it was videotaped of these kids fighting under the bleachers, and it's that sad thing not breaking apart. These kids are videotaping the fight, and it's just, with their group of friends are sharing it, it's just very sad.
Yeah, so when we have the discussion, the idea of having the discussion and more student and administration and teacher and parent involvement in that discussion to make sure that our practice and policy is actually new enough, because I think most of it probably still falls into when we were in school. It's pretty black and white on bullying and the processes of which you could bully someone. I don't caught up to all the ways.
I think given that board meeting to watch is December 8th, so it's recorded and on the website too, because the presentation will be on there. I think give that a watch, and then moving forward, I think answering lingering questions, we can probably get after too.
It was truly, it was a great presentation.
So with the bullying discussion and based off of all the community comments tonight and the student comments, I think we need to put administration and teachers and staff on even higher alert than they already are, just to make sure that there isn't a resurgence of bullying tomorrow or the rest of the week based off of what our discussions were tonight.
I guess absolutely. Why would there be more bullying tonight? Why would there be more bullying than what happened?
We're having a meeting, sir.
I'd like to
This
know.
is not public comments. We're having a meeting, sir.
I'd like to know.
Let me, I'll just
Please.
based off of the discussion tonight and how that could linger into school tomorrow. I think it's wise of us to just be on higher alert. I would expect nothing, but what's the harm in being on higher alert?
You expect there to be a problem.
That's not what I said.
Not what he said.
That is not what he said.
Okay, let's.
Are there any other agenda items?
What I was saying was entirely in good faith, and you're taking it way out of context.
Are there any other future agenda items? Okay. I would like to suggest that, we table, the, item number 8, due to the late hour. I'd like a motion for that, please.
I'll make a motion.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Move to reconvene with that in October. If I could have a motion for adjournment, I'd appreciate it. All in favor? Thank you, everyone.
If anyone that would like to hear a prayer for the school, please stick around for a few moments. Dear wonderful Lord Jesus, we ask you to bless the school, the ground it sits on, people who run it, the teachers that teach in it, and the children who attend it. We ask you to send down angels to protect all who enter these grounds. We ask you to fill them to overflowing with your love, so that all who enter see each other with your eyes rather than with their own. We pray this in your holy name, Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Chris.